Jiro Hinamura is tired of his life. Like many others, he moved to Tokyo when he found a job there. Before he knew it, years flew by. And now he's in his mid-30s, exhausted, overloaded with work, and not earning enough. It's a situation many of us understand. The unfortunate workers had to labor on holidays without proper pay. One night, as Sojiro was heading home, he was preoccupied with his phone. Lost in thought and exhausted, he stepped onto the road without looking, unaware of the approaching truck. The outcome was unavoidable. Sojiro was struck. As his awareness slipped away into the dark, he suddenly heard a woman's voice. She informed Sojiro that he hadn't made it through the crash. Sojiro believed that everyone who walked by vanished. When she heard him say this, the woman laughed. She went on to share how Sojiro once cleaned her statue. That small gesture of kindness earned him a special favor from the goddess. She played a trick on poor Sojiro, which made her step in and tell him that she would send him to live in another world just like he is now. In other words, he's getting a fresh start, but in a whole new game this time. From that angle, she turned to Sojiro and asked what he wished for. He took a brief pause before replying that he desired a peaceful life. He wanted to avoid going back to the dull and unsatisfying life he had before. The only highlight was the delicious meals he cooked while camping in the countryside. Those were the best he ever tasted. Sojiro reminisced about his passion for camping, crafting, and creating things, dreams he hoped to pursue in his next life. The goddess felt even happier upon hearing this, believing it was destiny that brought them together in such a way. She gave him the magical item, craft gear. She also mentioned that it has 2 special abilities and that he can summon it whenever he wants. For the moment, the goddess placed crafting tools within Sojiro's body, and he expressed his gratitude for the present. After that, she sent him off to his new world, but not before sharing her name. She is the mother goddess Anna, showering him with blessings for his body and soul to find true happiness. She shone with joy, pleased that her final gift went to someone like Sojiro, who felt a bit confused by it all. In an instant, Sojiro came back to life, his body whole and ready for a brand new adventure. First, he needed to make sure everything was working properly. To his amazement, it felt easier and smoother than the previous one. Having a regular body is great, but having a healthy one is even better. Sojiro feels truly fortunate, especially since he has received a special artifact. On that note, he created some crafting tools. The moment he summoned the item, it instantly materialized in his hand as a pocket knife. Looking at it more closely, it's quite compact, but it fits comfortably in his grip. He discovered that saying the artifact's name lets him call it whenever he wants, which is quite typical of Fushiguro. But putting the divine artifact aside, Sojiro is mainly worried about being lost in the wilderness. He quietly appreciated his hobbies of solo camping and relaxing outdoors. He has the right gear, a great appearance, and all the necessary tools. Now it's time to embrace the camping lifestyle. Jiro focused and began to evaluate the scene, looking over the camping equipment. In this new world, could divine weapons unexpectedly change into something else? He shut his eyes and tried out this idea. As he worked, he recalled the goddess's words. The second purpose of the craft gear is as a tool, transforming the device into whatever he imagines. As soon as he did that, the object transformed into a hatchet. Considering the situation, he needed to test its strength. He focused on the closest tree and threw the hatchet with all his strength. It hit the trunk with a loud bang. Suddenly, the trunk was heading right for his face. If he hadn't reacted in time, he would have been flattened like a pancake. Suddenly, the tree froze in the air. At that moment, he heard the goddess speak, revealing the second power of the artifact. It can repair items. Unlike traditional crafting, which requires a workspace and various tools, the artifact repair feature lets Sojiro create with minimal equipment. He just has to tap into his imagination. For instance, to build a birdhouse, you'll need a piece of wood, a workbench, and some tools like a hammer and nails, along with a few other supplies. The goddess says he can repair anything, anywhere, as long as he can picture it. He can even mend time and space. In short, it's all about making things easy. So, even though the explanation came a bit late, Juro let it slide. With a clearer grasp of craft gear, Sojiro went to get it and noticed it was somewhat challenging to use. Nevertheless, he got back to work, deciding to create a staff this time. It's a handy tool for navigating bumpy ground. Jero spotted a good branch that was just the right size and started to carve it to his liking. As he works, he remembers how important it is to treat the tools with care. Soon enough, he completes most of the staff's body. He went ahead and shaped the handle, and soon enough, he was done. Sojiro gave it a quick try and liked most of it, but he needed to tweak the grip a bit. Sojiro has a sharp knife and a range of handy tools. He can also take things apart and put them back together whenever he wants, which he thinks will help him survive in the wild. Having finished with his team, Sojiro was ready to dive into Jumanji, this new realm. The first thing he needed to locate was water. People can only survive without water for 3 days. If they go without drinking for just 1 day, they can become dehydrated quickly. He traveled north, aware of how risky it was to stay put in a strange place. On the bright side, he believed the goddess wouldn't lead him into a perilous situation. Strolling through the jungle, He noticed how different it was from his old office job. This contrast filled him with gratitude, as he finally felt truly free. As soon as the thought crossed his mind, his stomach began to rumble. Now that he is free and feeling hungry, finding something to eat has become a priority. He was surprised to find the river so quickly, even though the water seemed a bit too murky to drink. Luckily, he wasn't thirsty at the moment, so he chose to concentrate on other tasks in Animal Crossing, like constructing a shelter. Nights in the woods can be quite cold, so a cozy bed is essential. He chose to set up his small shelter a bit away from the river to avoid the chill, and then started collecting what he needed. He gathered sticks and a vine to hold up his shelter and arranged them carefully. Next, he took additional branches and propped them against the structure's slant, then covered them with dry grass and leaves to shield against the rain. He took a few small cut logs and arranged them inside for his bed. Then, he topped it off with some leaves. And just like that, his shelter was complete. While sitting inside, he recognized the value of craft gear. If he relied on the usual tools he had on Earth, it would take him ages to cut and shape the branches. He was surprised he could get it all done in just an hour. The man hardly worked up a sweat. He stretched widely, brimming with energy, when he caught a sound nearby. Turning around, he spotted a big rabbit with a horn sticking out from its forehead. This white, Umbrian-like creature is about the size of a medium dog. Just as he was trying to figure out if it was friendly, the animal rushed towards him, using its horn to charge. Fortunately, Sojiro was quick and blocked the attack with his staff. He switched on his craft gear and adjusted his staff to hold the rabbit's horn tightly. Now the unfortunate animal is stuck, flailing in the air. His camping know-how proved useful once more. Recalling how wild, mountain creatures can be quite untamed. Thinking about what just occurred, Sojiro expressed his gratitude to the goddess once more before facing the rabbit. Aware of its possible fate, the little creature attempted to make the sweetest face it could to avoid any trouble. Sojiro just smiled at the rabbit and said it would be his meal, no matter what. He then got busy right away. After killing the creature, he collected its blood, removed the organs, and washed the body in the river. Then he skinned it and prepared the meat. He looked to see if the body had any poison sacs, and luckily, it didn't. Instead, he noticed that the creature's heart had a strange shape, making him think that this rabbit might be unusual, especially with that big horn as a clear sign. He had just put it together when he heard a rustling sound from behind. Sojiro spun around and spotted a black puppy with unusual markings on its forehead, resembling a version of Fushiguro's black demon dog from JJK. Sojiro couldn't help but smile when he saw the adorable puppy gazing at him with curiosity. It seemed too charming to have an owner, yet it didn't appear to be a stray either. He gave the puppy some of the rabbit's insides to eat. The little guy gobbled them up quickly, and that's when Sojiro spotted the bow tied in the pup's fur. Perhaps this little pup has an owner. He couldn't get a good look because the puppy dashed away quickly. Sojiro grabbed the box with the insides and saw that the puppy had only eaten the heart. A scream from behind startled him, and he turned to find an elven woman perched on a tree branch. She inquired if he had seen a puppy, but before Sojiro could respond, the elven woman assumed he had already eaten it. He quickly brushed it off, saying the insides were different, and showed her where the puppy had gone. Hearing this, she let out a sigh of relief, thanked Sojiro, and hurried off to search for the dog. Alright, let's get back to it. Sojiro gathered everything he needed. He has a place to stay, a bed to sleep in, food to eat, and water to drink. But the most crucial thing is fire. Starting your own fire can be quite challenging because you need the right supplies. You need dry pine branches and firewood, along with some crafting tools. With these, he managed to make a bowl for starting a fire. He considered using the bow drill technique to start a fire. Once he got it working, he began boiling water in a bowl crafted from jaw tree bark. Sojiro is using materials from the local trees and resources. Now, let's take a look at the water. Sojiro gave it a gentle blow before taking a tiny sip. It didn't taste strange at all, so he figured he would be okay. Now, it's time to get the meat ready. He had a little bit already sizzling on a small stone plate. He made it by slicing off a piece from a small rock. Returning to his tasks in the dungeon, he made sure the meat was cooked evenly on both sides before placing it on a wooden plate to serve. Once he expressed his gratitude, he took a bite and was amazed by the rich taste of the rabbit meat. It has the softness of chicken but is more like duck in flavor. For a plain piece of meat, Sojiro couldn't stop raving about how tasty it was, especially considering all the hard work that went into making it. Once he was done eating, Sojiro sat still by the fire. He enjoyed the crackling of the wood and the cozy heat, as it had been a long time since he felt such comfort. Having finished his meal and set up his shelter, Sojiro felt it was time to unwind. Keeping warm is key to surviving, and he had already taken care of that. Even though he has the basics, it's only normal to crave more. In Sojiro's mind, he was already considering the right wall and table decorations when his thoughts were interrupted by the return of the puppy he had seen earlier. Where did that elf go? With just him and the puppy around, Sojiro decided to take care of the little guy and gave him some meat to eat. He vowed to locate the dog's owner the next morning, but for now, they chose to sleep side by side. The following day, Sojiro headed out to search for the pup's owner, with a ladder snugly tucked in his bag. As he walked, Sojiro made a mark to help him find his way back. While he did this, he couldn't shake the thought of whether there were more elves like her. The puppy's ears shot up before it leaped down and began to growl at something. The small dog crouched low, barking at something that Sojiro couldn't spot. Soon after, they heard a loud scream that he guessed came from a monster. The sound of the creature didn't seem to suggest a fight over territory, which meant it must be battling the elven woman they had seen earlier. He rushed toward the noise as it grew louder and louder. At the scene, the elven woman he had seen earlier was battling a griffin, wearing nothing but a towel. It seems she was ambushed while taking a bath. Just when things were about to escalate, the puppy began barking to distract the creature. As soon as the monster spotted Sojiro, it zoomed toward him, but he was ready with the ladder. He quickly switched his gear to a hammer and hurled it at the monster's chest. The griffin was knocked out when it hit a tree. Sojiro was once more reminded of how risky craft gear can be, but he couldn't dwell on it for long. He recognized the voice and turned to find the elven woman complimenting him for defeating the griffin in a single blow. As he gazed at her, Sojiro felt momentarily stunned by her captivating presence, but he did his best to remain composed. She chatted casually, saying sorry for her outburst since she had just been attacked by the monster while taking a bath. Jiro also apologized, explaining that he didn't intend to disturb her and that he was just an ordinary human. After hearing that, she mentions that no one can do what he just did to the griffin. But before they could discuss it further, Sojiro offered her his clothes for cover. She accepted his offer and wrapped it around herself as she shared how difficult it was to fend off the griffin with only a short sword. She assured him she would repay him, but Sojiro said there was no need to stress since the little black pup had kept him warm through the night. The elf woman shared that she discovered the puppy after its parents left it behind, but little did she know she would be the one in need of rescue. Then, she introduced herself as Misty, a high elf residing in the holy woods of the Great Tree. Sojiro agreed, mentioning he arrived at the forest just yesterday. Later on, Misty finally put on suitable clothes and even tried to get some compliments from Sojiro. Naturally, our friend is quite straightforward, which made Misty feel excited. Now, let's focus on the bigger issues at hand. Other demons rummaged through Misty's things, leaving her with just a few clothes. They even took her bow, which really annoyed her. So the always polite Sojiro suggested taking her to a nearby village, if there was one. When Misty heard his idea, she wasn't very excited about it, and pointed out that the village was quite far from where they were. Moreover, she has spent the past 10 years alone in this forest, which leaves Sojiro puzzled. Could there be a story behind it? She mentioned that she left the village a long time ago. You might think it's silly, but she's staying in the forest out of stubbornness. The divine tree forest is sacred to the elven ancestors, even though Misty's people can no longer call it home. Right now, the forest is home only to the animals and the trees. Misty decided to explore how she could make the most of this space. Since he was only a day old in the area, Juro wondered why the forest had remained untouched for so long, leaving Misty in disbelief. Did he really not have any idea? Misty pulled out her sword and began carving into the tree. She demonstrated how tough the bark felt, like solid rock. Also, the creatures and plants around here are incredibly powerful. She says that the forest's ancestors made this place because they kept misplacing the treasures that helped them manage their battles. Sojiro grabbed his crafting tools and began working on the bark. The blade sliced into the trunk effortlessly, like cutting through a marshmallow. Misty wasn't one to back down. She took it as a challenge and tried to stab the tree harder, using way more strength than needed, but her blade wouldn't go in all the way. Finally, she gave up and accepted that she couldn't win this time. Sojiro shared that he depends on the object he held, calling it a holy item. After his explanation, Misty bowed once more, demonstrating her respect, unaware that she was actually speaking about the sacred one all along. Sojiro definitely preferred not to be called that and urged her to keep talking like usual. But wow, he realized the artifact was worth way more than he first believed. Anyway, Misty said she would go get some salt since there was still some available in the secret warehouse. Salt is essential in every kitchen, but Sojiro didn't want Misty to put in all that effort for him. She was determined, claiming that she's a woman of her word and already owes him a great deal. Before he could argue, Misty quickly went to get some salt, leaving Sojiro alone with the puppy once more. Despite the tricky situation Misty faced, Sojiro admired how she handled it calmly, a feeling shared by the goddess. He then chose to prepare a meal for her as a gesture of gratitude and started to gather his cooking tools. While Misty was occupied collecting salt, Sojiro focused on gathering ingredients for their meal together. He caught the same rabbit again. This time, he also picked some wild greens that resembled those from his old world, hoping they wouldn't cause any stomach troubles. He gave them a test yesterday by holding them against his skin and nibbling on them to check if they were safe too. Eat. Soon after, Misty came back with a bag of salt and was taken aback to find Sojiro in the kitchen. She gave him the rock salt, saying sorry if it wasn't sufficient, but he accepted it with gratitude. To make up for it, she offered to assist him however she could. She mentioned that her magic was limited and she could only fight with a short sword. Why couldn't she just buy what she needed in town? She says it's impossible because she's out of money. To top it off, she also misplaced the items she needed for trading. She could only let out a sigh, realizing how tough it would be to handle everything, especially with the little one to look after. So, Juro gladly took on the responsibility. He also enjoys dogs. However, what really caught Misty's attention was the dish he was preparing. Jiro calmly walked through how to make the broth by pulling it from the rabbit's meat and bones. It tasted nice, but he still longed for some dashi to add a little more flavor. Misty was unfamiliar with the idea, but she was thrilled about the big rabbit he caught for dinner and couldn't wait to eat it. Curious, Sojiro asked her how she would prepare the rabbit if he wasn't around. She straightforwardly said she would just prepare the rabbit by skinning and roasting it, but it would be great to have some classic spices. When he heard this, Sojiro instantly thought of McCormick and other seasonings. There's no point in dwelling on what they lack, so he encouraged Misty to have fun with the puppy while he wrapped up his cooking. By the end of the day, Sojiro couldn't ignore his love for good food, as one would expect from someone raised in a world of culinary battles. After a while, he completed their dish, which featured rabbit grass soup and grilled rabbit tenderloin. As Misty tasted the soup, a smile spread across her face because it was so tasty. Sojiro enjoyed his too, noticing that today's rabbit meat was even more tender and flavorful than yesterday's. Once they finished their meal, Misty suggested that he give the puppy a name, thinking it would be special for the little guy to have a meaningful one. Jiro then chose the name Matsukaze, inspired by a legendary warhorse owned by the samurai lord Toshimasu Maeda. Misty doesn't need to find out that he named the puppy after a well-known story about a samurai lord while he was taking a bath. Misty is simply thrilled that Matsukaze finally has a name, while Sojiro tries to change the subject by suggesting they search the griffin's body for useful materials. She informs him that the creature's meat can be eaten, but it tastes awful. Still, they could make use of the griffin's claws and the large stone. It's a gem created inside a powerful magical creature. Typically, it can be found in the flesh pouch close to the heart, making that area very important. Misty suggests they should grab it since it's seen as precious, but she doesn't want to raise their expectations. They went directly to the griffin's remains and took the mass stone. As Misty anticipated, the creature's mask broke from the power Sojiro unleashed before. This time, he reminded himself to target the creature's head to protect the mass stone. Misty wasn't too down about it. In fact, he cautions him to be careful because some creatures are quite powerful. With the griffin's mask broken, she requests that he pass it to Matsukaze, and Sojiro agrees. She mentions that although Matsukaze is still young, the pup is a demon beast and needs to gather more magic to become powerful. That clears up why the small creature was munching on the rabbit's insides when they first crossed paths. Also, they pick at the griffin's sharp claws. Misty says these can clean water. If they add them to drinking water, it won't cause stomach issues. Additionally, it promotes healing and works well as a food preservative. Jiro intended to request just half of the hook claws, but Misty insists he takes the entire lot. So Jiro believes that cutting them in half could be useful later. Misty quickly agreed, and, while she was at it, asked if she could set up her base close to Sojiro's. Matsukaze had started to feel a bond with him, making it a good idea for them to be close by. Sojiro paused for a moment, but she was right. It would be tough for him without Matsukaze and Misty's support. Sensing his feelings, Misty spoke up, saying that if she were in Sojiro's place, having someone with her would make her feel much happier. There are many unexpected wonders in a new place, so having someone to lean on would be great. Sojiro couldn't help but chuckle at her words. Yet, there was a hint of truth in that. He was indeed taken aback when they first crossed paths. It's his first time meeting an elf. She even reenacted their encounter, this time with extra flair, which made Sojiro laugh again. It's been ages since he could laugh like this. Misty smiles and suggests that having someone like her around would make it even better. Her cheerful smile reminded him once more that he had truly started anew. Everything moves so quickly that he sometimes struggles to keep pace. Seeing Misty now brings him comfort. He then tells her that he should be the one asking her to be friends with him. The three of them chose to move in together. Misty's home was a rundown shack due to the monster attacks, and Sojiro didn't feel connected to his old place, so they agreed to find a nicer spot to live. After they found a spot, they got to work. Misty started setting up the monster repellent, while Sojiro offered to construct a new house for her. She was surprised, as building another house wasn't really an issue for her. Sojiro was already in his fix-it mode, eager to get better at using craft gear. Since he was determined, Misty decided to let him carry on. With Misty away, he got to work on his project, starting with preparing the area. He dug into the soil, then filled it back in, smoothed it out, and compacted it to make the ground even. After that was figured out, he shifted his focus to the structure and began shaping the tree trunks. He quickly realized on his first day that if he rushed the cutting, the trunk could topple over onto him. So he made sure to cut the trunk at an angle to stay safe. He kept doing this, and soon enough, Sojiro had a stack of logs ready just as Misty came back from using her monster repellent spell. She was really impressed by how fast Sojiro got it done. However, she stayed modest and highlighted that she was the true magician of the pair. Since Sojiro achieved far more than she had, Misty wondered if she could assist with additional tasks. So Sojiro requested her assistance in bringing the logs back to their spot. Just like when he built his first shelter, he used wooden logs to form the framework of the new building. He chose a square building with a slanted roof this time. To cover the roof, he used strips of tree bark to shield it from rain and other weather, completely surrounding the new structure. The only drawback of the new house is that it's quite dim inside. Luckily, Misty has magic that brightens up the space with her glowing orb. Jura searches for Lorne, wishing he might possess some kind of magical ability too. However, the elven noble informs him that she can hardly detect any magic within him, making him somewhat like a version of Astadot. Juru chopped out a section of the wall to make a door and then went on to build a fireplace. This way, they can use it to warm up and even cook without going outside. He swiftly began digging trenches around the house to create a basic channel for rainwater to drain. He then chose to take a quick break with Matsukaze by the riverbank. Soon, Misty arrived and informed Sojiro that the local soil could be used for construction. Then, she moved in a bit too close to Sojiro. After a brief pause, she began waving her arms, saying she could only assist with collecting supplies to strengthen the house. Jiro feels a bit jealous that she can use magic, which he thinks is really awesome. When Misty heard this, she reminded him not to underestimate magic. Magic is quite useful. It doesn't involve smoke or flames, and it's easy to use. While he pondered this idea, Misty excitedly talked about how great it must be to bring your thoughts to life, especially with Sojiro by her side. She even shared that she had never seen a shovel before, confusing it with a scoop. So, Sojiro needed to clarify how the two differ. After their break, they started using soil from the riverbank as wall paste and mixed in some extra materials to strengthen it. They covered the outside walls with a mixture of putty to stop drafts from entering their area. In the end, they used a piece of bark as a door, and just like that, they created a new shelter. Misty is once more astonished by how they managed to achieve so much in just one day, struggling to believe that this place is now her home. Meanwhile, Sojiro feels he didn't do enough. Having only put together a temporary bed from dried grass and tree bark, he promised to build a better bed the next day, which earned him a playful jab from Misty. Even though they were in a new world, Misty could tell that a guy who cares about his bed has likely visited many brothels, leaving Sojiro feeling quite embarrassed. Just to clarify, it's nothing like that. Let's jump ahead to later that evening. Misty visits Sojiro's house and tells him she'll switch off the lights when she goes to bed. Then, she asks if he wants his lights turned off as well. Sojiro mentioned he would be up late because he was close to finishing his personal project. This caught Misty's interest, prompting him to ask what Sojiro was creating, just as Sojiro presented him with a carved figure of the goddess. He couldn't picture her face, so he relied on the sound of her voice to shape his creation. Misty believed the goddess would love it and inquired about her name. Sojiro informed him that her name was Anna, the mother goddess and the source of all gods. Misty didn't recognize the name, but perhaps the older elves were familiar with her. As Sojiro held the figure close, he recalled the goddess saying he was the last one. A sense of unworthiness washed over him, making him think that the goddess could have chosen someone more driven for this role. Misty reassured him that the goddess chose wisely by picking a man who values kindness over fame and ambition, unlike his simple wish. Misty, who has always held on to her beliefs, shows that being proud of your values is truly worthwhile. Looking back, it could be seen as a positive thing. After hearing all this, Sojiro felt a bit more confident in himself. As Misty encouraged him, saying the goddess likely appreciated someone like him, he stood up and placed the tiny statue on a small raised altar. It was at that moment that they both finally wished each other good night. As Misty returned, Sojiro gazed at the figurine once more, reflecting on his strong desire to savor tasty meals in a perfect setting before his time was up. He expressed his gratitude to the goddess again and decided to improve their campsite the next day. He had no idea that Sojiro was about to confront one of the toughest questions of his life. It came unexpectedly from a barely dressed Misty, who asked if he wanted to join her for a bath. Before that, he will experience a tough wake-up moment. Something hot and damp jolts him awake. Misty was up early, stretching and saying good morning to a disheveled Sojiro. It seemed she was aware that Matsukaze had given him a playful lick on the face that morning. He headed directly to their water supply for a drink. He was amazed at how clear it was. Did you know? The claws of the griffin have cleansing abilities. Sojiro was quietly talking to himself about wanting to clean up with the water. Misty heard him and eagerly suggested they take a bath together. Sojiro sputtered on his water and had to double-check if she was for real, and it turns out she was. Due to his reluctance, she had to inquire if he only bathes sometimes, which he quickly denied, claiming he showers every day. Fantastic. Misty took the lead, but not before sharing her reasoning for bathing together. The idea is simple. While one person cleans up, The other keeps an eye out for any approaching monsters. It's a strong way to fight off monsters. Her explanation really cleared things up. She also trusts Sojiro, which is why she asked him to join. Misty was the first to enter, cleaning herself while wrapped in a small towel. Sojiro watched from a distance, noticing some clear signs about Misty's body. Eventually, Misty came over and said she was finished. She gave him the towel he had used and told Sojiro she would handle it from here. Hold on, is this the same towel she wore as a bathrobe earlier? Misty explained that it was the only towel they had. However, he couldn't stop thinking about how this thin cloth had just been wrapped around her body a short while ago. He quickly pushed those thoughts aside when he saw Misty use her magic to dry her hair. Wow, it can even dry clothes. Before she suggested something silly, Sojiro went to the river for a peaceful bath. Once they were done cleaning up, they enjoyed a light breakfast prepared by Sojiro. As they eat, Misty inquires about their plans for the day. Sojiro replies that he will be working on furniture and windows. He prioritizes quality in his work, so he asks Misty to handle the hunting. She's eager to help, especially since she wants to begin training Matsukaze as well. Jiro intends to begin by creating a table and a chair. However, he first needs to build a table to support the table he wants to make. He sliced 2 slim boards and carved out a section on each side to reduce their weight. In the center, he made a groove to fit the boards together, forming an X shape. He set up a cross stage and used a ceiling board for the tabletop. Studying the house layout, he began to visualize where the windows, chairs, and bed would go. In moments like this, he often longed for a trusty pen and paper. But you have to work with what you've got. So Sojiro kept crafting furniture until he completed a dining table set. Now they can enjoy a proper meal together. Just like that, Misty came back with a new companion. This time, she had a Butterfree with her. She excitedly reveals the Silkimos, leaving Sojiro stunned. Even more surprising is that this spirit creature can connect with Sojiro in a way that doesn't involve words. Spirit beasts are not like ordinary animals. They are thought to originate from the fairy world. The Misty speaks for the Silkimos as she shares the story of how the spirit beast suddenly appeared and hovered above S's roof, showing its desire to stay with them. It's interesting that the spirit beast can't speak, yet its feelings are clear enough for Misty to understand. Silkimos soared over to the new table and used its magic to create a lovely cloth from nothing, presenting it to Sojiro. The creature proposes to make fabric for Sojiro if it can stay with them. Naturally, he gladly accepts Silkimos into their expanding family. Additionally, it seems he's beginning to grasp it as well. Sojiro and Misty showered the spirit beast with affection until Matsukaze began to growl, irritated by the new addition to the family. Sojiro felt the rising tension, so he decided to win over the puppy by petting its fur. Just then, Misty asked what they should name the spirit beast. He suggested calling it Musubi after the silkworm god, since the spirit beast resembled a silkworm moth. The 4 friends came together at the table, and Sojiro didn't notice he was about to make a huge mistake in his new life. Meanwhile, Sojiro was excited about the chair and table he had just built, which was pretty impressive for someone doing it for the first time. Now they can enjoy a good meal, allowing him to finally unwind, or maybe not. He jumped up suddenly and banged his hands on the table, surprising both Misty and poor Musubi. This made her wonder if something was up. Sojiro explained that he had to finish something fast and quickly set up a project on his workbench, catching Misty's and Musubi's attention even more. Meanwhile, Sojiro is focused on his current project. He can't believe he overlooked making this one first. His priorities are out of whack. Fortunately, craft gear reduced his hours. Once he had all the parts ready, he just had to put them together and set up the space. The first step was to dig a big, deep hole. Next, he placed the foundation stones and put wooden planks on top, then built the walls. With time running out, he quickly put together a basic L-shaped structure that was easy to assemble. He made a small hole in the floor and placed a round, log-like structure that resembled a toilet, complete with a seat and a lid that could be opened. Next, he gathered some leaves, filled the basin with water, and added the griffin's hooked claws, then put on the door. It was finished. He built a functional outhouse to meet their hygiene needs. Now, as Sojiro admired his recent achievement, he was surprised to realize he had misjudged his priorities. Even though it was only a short-term solution, he found himself curious about how they would manage their waste in the future. But that was a concern for another time. Sojiro chose to give it a try and felt thrilled to enjoy this quiet moment alone. Since it worked out nicely, he hurried to tell Misty, who also came to see their newly constructed outhouse. Watching the building come together so quickly was impressive. She began to worry that Sojiro might be pushing himself too hard, but it was all part of the job. The following day, the expanding group welcomed a new member. Musubi swooped in, bringing Sand Slash along for the ride. The small creature stood up on its back legs, but all Sojiro could focus on was the fact that he was witnessing an armadillo. Out of nowhere, it began to thrash about. Sojiro was completely puzzled by what it was trying to communicate. Luckily, Misty hurried over, excited, and told him that legendary creatures often gather around him. This creature is known as Riddles. It enriches the soil and is quite useful for farming tasks. He gazes at the creature and inquires if it can be named Yukatama, after the fertility god. The creature then looks at Misty and appears to communicate something to her. She interprets for the creature, explaining that the latter aims to nurture the plants and uses the dirty waste to enrich the soil. Sojiro quickly realized that the beast intended to use it as compost. With everything decided, Sojiro's main worry is what to feed them. He knows Musubi enjoys rice with leaves and salt water, but what should he give this guy? Misty recommends they give him wood, water, and fruits. The forest is filled with plenty of strawberries and other wild fruits, along with an abundance of wood. Putting food and shelter on hold, Sojiro and the fertility god got right to it. Their first task was to remove the tree stumps. If they had an excavator, they could have done everything effortlessly. However, since he's in a different situation, hard work is essential. A key step in removing tree stumps is to sever the roots. This means you'll be doing a lot of digging and cutting, which can be quite exhausting. This was exactly why he had been delaying this job for some time. At least he had his tools with him, so he felt confident that most of the work would be easier. Guess what? The craft gear truly came through. The object transformed into a chain block and floated in the air without a tripod. Sojiro just had to connect the hook to the wooden stump and yank it out. He began yanking out tree stumps one by one, and soon enough the space was clear. Now, it was time for the fertility god to take action. Jiro asked the spirit beast to help him create a vegetable garden, and the beast began to prepare the soil. Meanwhile, Jiro kept busy crafting furniture. After some time, Sojiro paused to see how Ukatama was doing. To his surprise, the creature had already tilled the entire field, making it ready for planting. He spotted the small creature happily tearing apart a piece of wood and expressed his gratitude for the great work. Next, Sojiro handed Musubi some fur to make clothes. Ukatama provided the spirit beast with its internal organs and bones to serve as fertilizer. Matsukaze, intrigued, walked over to Ukatama, noticing that the spirit beast was holding a big bone. Soon, the three beings began to play together. Watching them, he couldn't resist asking Misty why unusual spirit animals had started showing up in his house. She explained that it was likely because they wanted to soak up Saja's heavenly presence. Since he crafted a tiny statue of the goddess, it makes sense that it would radiate divine energy, drawing in spirit beasts. That's a concerning idea, but Misty reassured him that it's actually positive. After all, their first encounter happened because of a unique spirit creature, so he should view it as a good omen. Hearing her say that gave him confidence. In response, Sojiro told her that being with Misty brings him joy. The elven woman became flustered and flushed, unaware that he enjoyed her company because sharing a meal was more delightful. On the topic of food, Misty had brought along fresh meat, a massive boar. It appears there was some truth to her words from before. Good things continue to happen around Sojiro and in this world. At the same time, a mysterious figure in a cloak walks up to the receptionist at the Adventurers Guild. When she showed her ID, the concierge turned pale as she recognized who she was speaking to, Iono from the Black Sea. All eyes were on the adventurers as they began to murmur about Iono. How could someone so thin be the infamous Iono? Wasn't he a magician at the royal court? The concierge inquired, turning to Iona to ask what they were up to there. It turns out that he is really a she, and she wants to visit the sacred tree forest. This is not good. Sojiro's salt will run out soon. Holding the tiny grains of salt in his hand, he turns to Misty and asks her where she gets it. The elven noble says she picked it up in the nearby human town. Noticing they're running low, Misty suggests they should collect some other supplies while they're there. If they sold all the supplies they collected on their way to town, they could afford to buy things like ink or dye. Just hearing that was enough to get Sojiro excited. Misty had never seen him this thrilled before, so they chose to go to town with Musubi, leaving Matsukaze and Ukatama behind. Misty informs him that it will take them 3 days to reach the closest town on foot. If it were just her, she could move much quicker than most people, but then she hears something that interrupts their chat. She hurriedly informed Sojiro that something was coming, directing him towards the noise. Just then, a horned rabbit showed up and headed right for Sojiro. Fortunately for them, the creature didn't reach Sojiro because Musubi stepped in and stopped it before it could strike. Once again, they realized that spirit beasts are quite powerful, despite their fluffy appearance. One of the biggest hurdles of going to town is the constant threat of monster attacks. Sojiro is fortunate to have Misty by his side, as she can sense monsters from a distance, helping them avoid surprise attacks. However, they still need to be very careful because they can be overwhelmed by groups, something that has happened frequently on their travels. They successfully defended against every monster assault until they encountered their greatest challenge, a massive two-headed serpent named Koshi Saju. The pair readied themselves for battle. Sojiro acted as the distraction while Misty dealt with one of the heads. With a swift strike, she severed it and then burned it to ashes. The other head quickly lunged at her, but Sojiro swiftly dealt with it in a single blow. As he approached to grab some gear, the snake's body jerked back and nearly hit him. Sojiro quickly used his walking staff to block the attack and pressed the snake's tail to the ground. Once pinned, the snake stopped fighting back. Thank goodness for Misty. who warned him that a snake's body can still move even after its heads are cut off. As for Misty, she hurried to check on Sojiro as soon as she arrived. Most importantly, she needed him to destroy one of the snake's heads before it could grow back. After he smashed it with his equipment, they finally conquered the giant snake once and for all. Misty felt excited because they successfully defeated the Kishosaju without anyone getting hurt, just by hitting its head. Sojiro, on the other hand, wasn't in a festive mood. He kept thinking about whether there were better ways to take it down instead of just smashing it apart. He felt thankful once more for the usefulness of craft tools. The main reason Misty was so excited was that they had found an intact magic stone and an expensive gall. Musubi arrived just in time with their bags, searching through the creature's remains for items to sell. Once they finished searching, they continued on their journey, faced another monster attack, and then made camp for the night. Sojiro set up his hammock, thanks to Musubi, between two trees and was already relaxing in it when Misty shouted to him about dinner. Oh right, dinner. They won't let that one slip their minds. Tonight's dinner features roasted snake and herb soup. The food had a strange smell, but it was still tasty. As they ate, Misty told Sojiro that he would be a great adventurer because of all the things they had achieved in the last few days. Sojiro wasn't really excited about the plan, as he preferred to lead a calm and simple life. Plus, everything he enjoyed was thanks to the goddess's gifts. The next morning, they continued on their way, but not before Misty mentioned that they would soon spot a path leading to the village. It was now the third day since they had departed from their starting point. Jiro notices that the air in the forest feels different, as they are now walking in a part that resembles a typical forest. However, the magical energy in this area remains strong. The area is home to many enchanting creatures, causing trouble for the humans. Typically, Misty and the townsfolk would call on soldiers to remove the pesky monsters, which often leads to fights. Although some of the creatures are tiny, their magic makes them tricky to deal with. This led Sojiro to pose a question. If they are magical creatures, do they have magical stones too? Misty answered that only the larger and more powerful ones possess magic stones. Additionally, they often require a team, or a significant number of troops to defeat a powerful magical beast. Due to the risks involved, the pay for this kind of work is quite substantial. After a moment, they arrived at the path that led to the human village known as Brown Wolves. The guards at the entrance were taken aback when they spotted Misty. They clearly didn't anticipate the elven noble's arrival, especially with a guest by her side. Misty quickly introduced Sojiro as her friend. The guard only requested the toll fee. Sojiro quickly handed over the money, and as they passed through the gate, he glanced back to see the guard grinning at him. What was that? Now let's head to Brown Wolf's town. This little village has a range of goods gathered from the sacred tree forest. As Sojiro strolled through, he realized it was a wonderfully calm spot. Misty mentioned that she feels like a local since she has been visiting the Brown Wolves for nearly 20 years. She also recalls the gate guard from when he was just a young boy. Now he's all grown up. Misty may not seem it, but she appears older than many others. What troubles him the most is the expression the guard gave him earlier. There's no point in dwelling on that since they've arrived at Misty's regular trading post. They had just started waiting outside when a large man burst out, angry and grumbling about the shopkeeper. That was the moment he finally saw it. Sojiro. The man moved in closer, taken aback by the stranger's face. He inquired if Sojiro had any reason to be at the shop. Before he could respond, Misty jumped in and asked the man if he had been in another fight. Spotting her made the man glance back and forth between Sojiro and Misty. Was he with her? That was more than enough small talk for him, so he quickly dashed away after giving Sojiro a couple of friendly taps. An older, slender man stepped out of the store, saying sorry for the loud guests inside. He looked at Misty and remarked that she had come by much earlier than she normally does. Misty explained to him that certain events led them to their current situation. When the older man saw Sojiro, he reacted just like the big guy did. He was shocked to see an elf with a man, something that hadn't happened in 2 decades. The older man quickly collected himself and introduced himself as Daro, the leader of the trade group. Once they had introduced themselves, Daro moved in closer to Sojiro and inquired about his connection with Misty. Based on Sojiro's response, Daro might even offer him some extra perks. Misty confronted him, and the older man reluctantly welcomed them into his place to check out what they had. Although things began on a rough note, Sojiro felt satisfied by the time they finished their deal. Misty did most of the talking, and he's just glad to have picked up what he needed, like spices and plenty of kitchen tools. He was still enjoying his new purchases when the big guy from earlier showed up next to him. The newcomer introduced himself as Sedk and inquired about their deal with Doro. Sojiro gladly shared the details. However, Sedk was more intrigued by another question. Did Sojiro reside in the sacred forest? Sojiro mentioned that, which piqued Sedk's interest even more. The divine forest is almost completely off-limits. How is Sojiro managing to live there? The trees are too hard to chop down, and the area is crawling with monsters as well. Sojiro replied right away, saying he lives like everyone else, as if that cleared up all of Sedk's inquiries. Sedex can also tell just by looking at him that Sojiro isn't a charcoal seller, so the latter reveals that he trades in items made from magical stones and creatures. From this, Sedk figured out that Sojiro was an adventurer and cautioned him that the most dangerous magician had just come to the region. The arrival of the magician stirred excitement in their tiny town, especially with news that he was going to the enchanted forest. Since Sojiro claimed to live there, Sed felt it was only right to give the magician a heads up. Whenever he faced a challenge, Sojiro should go directly to the guild. At last, the older man had one last question for Sojiro. What are his intentions in the sacred woods? Sojiro smiled and replied that he simply wants to prepare and enjoy tasty meals. He looked happy with the reply, and just then, Misty showed up and shouted for Sojiro. When Sojiro turned around, Sed had vanished. Back at Darrow's place, the older man frowned with concern. He was softly talking to himself about how the boundary between the ordinary world and the other side is shifting fast, especially since Misty came back so quickly with a human friend. At that moment, Sedk burst into the room, questioning the older man about his need for advice. Darrow glanced at Sedk as he disclosed that Sedk was, in fact, the town's viscount. Sedk smiled brightly. He clearly enjoyed that Darrow was looking for his advice. Darrow didn't want to, but he had no choice. It was about the task the elven noble had given him before. Misty had put her trust in him to handle the gall of the great serpent of the forest. It's a big, high-quality magic stone that's hard to sell. People think it can cure all sorts of poison. Adding to its worth, the great serpent is a beast that's hard to defeat. Numerous nighttime missions have attempted and fallen short. Darrow is worried about pricing the gall fairly so he can make a profit. This dilemma frustrates him because, for something as precious as the gall from the great serpent, Sojiro is only interested in trading for sugar, pots, and other spices. The numbers just don't make sense. When we break it down, Darrow owes Sojiro money, and that annoys the older man. At his age, Darrow never thought he would owe anyone anything, yet Misty expected him to be responsible for it for the next 100 years. Sed is really amazed that Sojiro was able to bond with Misty and make the village merchant owe them a favor. With Misty showing up and more items available for trade, Dotaro started to think that the two might be discovering ways to enhance the divine forest. Sedex isn't completely convinced, but he's worried that the two managed to carry such a big magic stone. This might indicate that Misty and Sojiro have significant strength even if Sojiro doesn't seem like it. He's still troubled by Sojiro's comment about chopping down trees in the sacred forest like it was just an everyday task, as if anything there is ordinary. Also, the magician showed up the other day. Darrow learned that the magician can consume more than just a ship's load. With Iono from the Black Sea coming to their region, Sed couldn't help but wonder what the magician's intentions were. They'll deal with that when the time comes, but for now, Darrow is asking Sed to help count the items Misty and Sojiro purchased. Meanwhile, Misty and Sojiro are as relaxed as always, completely unaware that they are causing Darrow a lot of stress. Misty is currently focused on getting the rock salt so Sojiro can leave for home sooner. Sojiro feels guilty for not being able to go with Misty. What can he do? His burden is already too heavy, so they decided that he and Masubi would return first. As they parted ways, Sojiro asked Masubi to make a quick stop, requesting the Silkimos to lead him there. Meanwhile, Iono from the Black Sea had just reached Sojiro's old hideout, a wicked grin spreading across her face. Sojiro wanted to go back to his old shelter because of the power of the craft gear. The shelter holds this power, and it might stay there for good unless he takes it apart. Leaving something so powerful behind could be risky, so he decided to return and dismantle the shelter. After 2 days of travel, Sojiro and Masubi arrived at the first shelter and discovered it was still standing strong. Even though Jiro had only been there for a day, he felt a connection to the spot. Just as he was about to take it apart, he noticed that the inside of the Lianto shelter was shockingly dark, as if he were looking into a deep void. Before the dark void could gaze back at him, Masubi swiftly yanked Sojiro away, aware of the lurking threat. Just then, Sojiro sensed something behind him and turned to see a massive panting demon bear. The creature charged at Sojiro, who quickly switched his gear to a mallet, preparing to bring it down. Just as the beast was about to reach him, a strange voice rang out, and a pale hand appeared from the shadows of his hiding place. Out of nowhere, huge tentacles wrapped around the monstrous bear just as Iono of the Black Sea appeared. However, her presence lost its power when Sojiro hit the bear, shattering it and the dark tentacles into pieces. Much like Saitama's legendary one-punch defeat, he felt a twinge of guilt for making a mess right when the bear's head dropped to the ground. That's when Sojiro spotted something delicate dangling from the creature's mouth, a pair of panties. Hold on, didn't someone just step out from the shadows a moment ago? Iono, trembling, shouted that no one was there, which only revealed her presence. Musubi followed Iono's voice, using her silk. Iono shouted in disgust as the silky moss pulled her out of the shelter, flipping her upside down. Sojiro was surprised to see her in a typical Japanese school sailor uniform, wondering how someone like her ended up here. He also realized who the owner of those ripped panties was. The girl was deeply affected by the incident. As Sojiro expressed regret for Musubi's behavior, he attempted to connect with her by introducing himself, but I only moved back further into the tent. After a moment, she finally said her name was Ichino Chigusa. As they both tried to apologize afterward, she felt so embarrassed about revealing that part of herself to Sojiro that she wished she could leap in front of a fast-moving train. Sojiro quickly dismissed the idea. But hold on, she understands trains. Now that I think about it, her name and outfit feel out of place here. Chigusa shares that she's Japanese and quite nervous about many things, so Sojiro can just call her casually. She was in a state of panic, so it took some time for Sojiro to help her relax. Once she was calm, he revealed that he is also Japanese and feels different in their world. That was all it took for Chigusa to open up. She revealed that despite her appearance, she had been part of their world for 4 years. Chigusa mentioned that others like her, from another world, are very uncommon. Chigusa might be wearing a Japanese uniform, but she isn't certain if she even finished school. Plus, in this world, people age at a very slow pace. Although she appears youthful, she is actually older than she seems. With her newfound confidence, Chigusa is excited to show how she can wield powerful magic, even as a D-rank adventurer. Sojiro was really interested in how she got into the shelter he created. When he voiced his thoughts, Chigusa instinctively stepped back even more. The older brother is the one who created this strong tent. Chigusa explained that she took refuge there because she was surprised by how many fierce monsters were in the divine tree forest. To make matters worse, her dark magic clashes completely with the forest and its creatures. Then, out of nowhere, she began to shake wildly as the dam finally gave way. Chigusa opened up, sharing how much had changed in the past 4 years. She was amazed that someone as downcast as she was could become well-known in a different world, thanks to magic. She had been busy for the past few years, darting around to handle errands. But she got tangled up in court politics, which was quite complex. She started going on and on about everything that occurred, and Sojiro had to interrupt her to help her settle down. In short, Chigusa fled from the demon bear as soon as she stepped into the sacred tree forest and took cover in Sojiro's shelter. She was simply trying to clean her underwear. Who would have guessed that the demon bear was actually a fierce hapasai? Let's move on from Chigusa. Isn't Sojiro's weapon a bit too strong? It knocked out the bear and Chigusa's tentacles with just one strike. Sojiro revealed that it's a special tool that assisted him in building the shelter, quite different from Chigusa's cheat skill, dark magic, and strong affinity. Chigusa, unable to do what Sojiro does, has chosen to stick around his shelter, claiming it will be her second home. At that moment, Sojiro intervened, revealing that he actually came to take the shelter apart. When Chigusa heard that, she had a mix of a meltdown and a panic attack because the shelter is quite strong. She claimed that the shelter had devoured a demon beast. She can't really go back home. To make things worse, her food is running low and she worries she won't last much longer. Jiro could only shake his head at the kid. Running out of food is one issue, but it would be tough for her if she got dehydrated. It could really harm her, even be deadly. He can't just abandon her out here. In the end, he asked Chigusa if she wanted to stay with them at their campsite. It was an obvious choice. Chigusa quickly said yes. After Sojiro took down the shelter, they headed back to the campsite. On the way home, Sojiro wanted to know more about Chigusa, especially her abilities and title. She happily shared that the name Chigusa Nantoka comes from her special skill, the Chigusa shadow manipulation spell. In their world, shortening words is normal. For her, dark magic has many uses. Sojiro stayed silent. He never imagined she would be so tearful and nervous. Forget it. Chigusa can hardly catch their breath after all that walking. Eventually, Musubi had to take her all the way to the campsite. When they arrived, Matsukaze greeted Sojiro with a flurry of kisses. He expressed his gratitude to Ukutama for watching over their base. As Ukutama held onto Sojiro's leg, the sight of the two adorable, fluffy animals instantly lifted Chigusa's spirits. Sojiro showed her his soft pets, but Matsukaze got overly thrilled and knocked her down, leaving her on the ground. It was an understatement to say Chigusa was surprised to find 2 buildings at the campsite. The girl was shocked, her eyes wide and her mouth agape, when she discovered real signs of human life right in the heart of the enchanted tree forest. She quickly glanced at Sojiro, her disbelief growing, and exclaimed that only gods could harness the magic of the trees and navigate past the creatures lurking in the woods. Sojiro mentions that Chika knows a lot about different worlds, which makes her blush slightly. However, it's clear she's been through some tough times, especially since she's thrilled to see a dining table arranged as if it's the height of human achievement. Sojiro was getting ready to make tea, quickly sharing how it was made by mixing and boiling some herbs nearby. Chigusa's jaw dropped again when she heard about a toilet. She was thrilled just to hear that, but Sojiro added that they didn't have any toilet paper, so they used leaves instead. That's when Chigusa revealed she had it. Her mood changed from cheerful to gloomy in an instant. Out of nowhere, a dark portal appeared as Chigusa pulled out paper from the shadows. She gave it to Sojiro and said there are many things they can keep hidden in the shadows, but it won't help them much in this place. If she stashed any valuable jewelry inside, people might think she was smuggling, which could result in her magic being evaluated. She learned this the tough way, losing nearly everything when a local lord accused her of it. To purchase food, they must go through the guild, which controls all transactions. Given the current system, the only way to obtain supplies is through bribery, a tactic many adventurers have learned to use. Sojiro understands the situation, but he chose to stay quiet. Chigusa went on to explain that having relationships is important in their world, yet no one ever showed her how to build them. Noticing that she's already feeling down, Sojiro chose to brighten the atmosphere by mentioning that an elf lives with him and will return in 3 days. Since this elf is female, he believes Chigusa will feel more comfortable and even offers to take her to the village. At that moment, everything came crashing down. Chigusa burst into tears, insisting she didn't want to go back to the village or work again. Sojiro felt for Chigusa, instead of criticizing her, recognizing that he too was a workaholic with no one to rely on. It served as a harsh reminder of his own struggles, working tirelessly yet never being appreciated and facing unfair treatment. As Sojiro watched Chigusa, he understood that she was facing struggles he had experienced at a much younger age, deepening his sympathy for her. With tears welling up in her eyes, she shared how difficult it has become to eat lately due to the awful taste of the food. Sojiro finally told her she could live with them. He would even build her a house. In return, she could assist him with various things, particularly regarding their world. Is he serious? Would he truly be fine with that? Especially since Chigusa can't come up with anything helpful. Does Sojiro want her to be his footstool or something? Chigusa genuinely believed he would treat her like furniture. So, Sojiro needed to explain that he wanted to use her magic. After all, her tentacles had the power to hold back the demon bear. Being able to hide things in the shadows is a useful talent that he didn't have. Just those two compliments were enough to brighten her mood. But to get back to the main idea, since he can't use magic, Sojiro hopes she will stay and assist at their campsite. This way, she can help him and discover more about the magic in this world. After that was decided, they began to enjoy Sojiro's homemade food while discussing the other person at the campsite. Chigusa remarked that if this elven woman shines as brightly as the sun, she might need to stay in the shadows. Sojiro thought it was strange, but he hoped Misty's comeback would teach them both valuable lessons about life. After their meal, Sojiro asked Chigusa for a favor, and she eagerly agreed to help him. As Sojiro made a new pot, Chigusa went to gather herbs for their meal. Sojiro prepared the fish they caught from the river, adding herbs and wild greens to make it delicious and tasty. As soon as Chigusa caught the scent of the food, tears nearly filled her eyes. It was the first real meal she had in 4 years. She began sharing tales about the outside world, leaving Sojiro surprised since the palace didn't serve meals that could compare to his cooking. She claimed that the fruits were the only delicious part of Sojiro's homemade meal. She requested another serving, and he gladly obliged. Once they finished their meal, Sojiro took Chigusa to see the tent she had put together for him. It was a quick project, so it was quite basic, but the latte was perfectly happy with it. She said the shelter he built earlier was cozy enough. So, the tent and blankets are more than sufficient for her. Jiro was curious about how she could sleep for so long. Since warmth rises and cold comes from below, she must have had some sort of protection, didn't she? Chigusa wrapped herself in dark magic while hiding under her blankets, which seemed a bit sad. So Jiro playfully teased her, but at least she's got a cozier spot to sleep now. Before heading to his hut, he mentioned that the area is protected from monsters, allowing her to sleep peacefully tonight. As he walked away, Chigusa expressed her gratitude once more, a feeling Sojiro shared as she learned more about this world from him. Feeling a bit awkward, she had to ask for his name again, worried that she missed it earlier. Sojiro shared his name and suggested she skip the honorifics. She hadn't chatted this much in ages, and now her throat was sore. That's how Sojiro ended up with a new guest at his campsite. The following morning, Sojiro was roused by Matsukaze's playful licks. Automatically, she greeted Misty with a cheerful good morning and realized that his elven companion had still not come back. Now that he understood, the area felt emptier without her. But Sojiro chose to shake it off and splash some water on his face. Just then, he heard a frantic scream from Chigusa's tent, where she was apologizing for sleeping in, even though she was a junior member. Similar to Sojiro, Chigusa awoke feeling damp and uncomfortable after Matsukaze's strike. She was so upset that she lost the memory of how to say good morning to someone else. Noticing Sojiro stretching, she inquires if he's practicing the radio exercises that were trendy at the time. He then invites her to join him for a quick stretching session. Once they finished, Sojiro proposed a quick swim, but first he checked with Chigusa about any extra clothes. Musubi had kindly repaired her uniform the night before, but Chigusa hesitantly asked if she could also get a pair of panties, since the demon bear Hapasai had taken hers the day before. They walked to the river, where Sojiro gave Chigusa a homemade soap made from griffin claws. He told her it was good for cleaning, and showed her a spot where she could wash easily. As soon as she undressed, The girl fell asleep, anxious about whether she could bathe in her birthday suit with Sojiro, just a short distance away. Sojiro remained where he was, realizing that Chigusa definitely needed a shower. She had a noticeable odor, but he couldn't bring himself to say that to her directly. Also, Chigusa ought to tidy herself up before seeing Misty. After her bath, Sojiro decided to help by brushing her hair. Chigusa believed he was being thoughtful, but Sojiro was mainly concerned about checking for lice or something worse. He was determined to impress Misty, wishing she would accept Chigusa without any problems. Chigusa was taken aback that Sojiro doesn't have the typical scent of an old man. Sojiro simply aims to maintain a tidy home for everyone, and he values cleanliness too. Today, Sojiro has a plan to build a cabin, and he needs wooden logs for that. With the three of them together now, he envisions a larger cabin where they can all stay, while the other houses will be used as storage. As he pondered his next steps, Chigusa came over and offered her assistance. But is she capable of doing physical work? While she primarily uses dark magic, she can also perform some useful tricks, such as making things levitate. She begins to levitate the logs as Sojiro shapes them, trimming and cutting to turn them into perfect building materials. Meanwhile, Chigusa helps by putting the completed logs away in the shadow space. His tasks are made easier with the crafting tools, and Chigusa's dark magic has sped up. Travel time. They paused briefly right before starting to put together the cabin, because Chigusa was struggling to keep pace. Even though she can lighten the objects, she still has to work hard and push them in specific ways. Today, Chigusa put in more effort than she has in the past 4 years. They got back to work shortly after. Even though Chigusa passed him a piece of wood, it was clear that she was worn out. Sojiro suggested that using the dark tentacles might make things simpler for her. To everyone's surprise, it did. Putting together the cabin with the frames, wall panels, roof, and outside walls was a smooth process since Chigusa understood the details well. Building the cabin became much simpler for everyone involved. Soon, they completed the cabin. She felt immense joy as she admired the finished work, looking at Sojiro with great admiration and calling him a wizard. However, she claimed it was all her doing. Sojiro expressed his gratitude, much to her astonishment, stating that without her help, they wouldn't have been able to construct the cabin at all. Now that they've finished, it's time to eat. Tonight's dish is bear stew, the same hapside demon bear that Sojiro hit in the last chapter. They were too focused on building the cabin to go hunting, so they ended up with bear meat for dinner. Sojiro couldn't stop thinking about Misty, knowing she would return by tomorrow morning. As he glanced at Chigusa, he realized he had to fill Misty in on everything that had happened. Deep down, he wished his elven friend would welcome Chigusa without any problems. At least, that's what he believed. The next day, Sojiro was overly hopeful. He never thought Misty would pull her swords on a scared Chigusa. The following morning, Chigusa gives fishing a go with her dark tentacles. She successfully catches one and throws it up, but ends up hitting the poor fish. Soj observed from the sidelines, wondering why she didn't just grab it by the hand. The answer was straightforward. It was disgusting. There's no chance Chigusa is going to handle that without gloves. If that were true, then why bother fishing at all? Chigusa wanted to be helpful today, so she figured she could pitch in by going fishing. She lifted the fish into the air and was ready to cook it with her dark tentacles by tossing it into the flames. Sojiro nearly lost his cool at that moment, so it was fortunate that Chigusa was able to grab the fish back with her dark tentacles. Sojiro advised her to take out the fish's insides first for better flavor. Just as she began, something hit the ground close to where Chigusa was standing. They both halted when a voice warned Chigusa to cease her dark magic. It was Misty. Misty stood alert, weapons ready and gaze sharp. She questioned Sojiro about his mental state at that moment. She was hit with a flood of questions about how long they had been together and whether he had been influenced by dark magic. Finally, he intervened, telling Misty that she misunderstood everything. Misty hesitated for a moment, then her expression turned a bit somber as she asked if the dark magic user had tempted him while he was gone. He smiled and assured her he was fine, saying that Chigusa posed no threat at all. Misty stayed quiet. Instead, she approached him and brought her face close to his. Realizing he was the same Sojiro she had known, she relaxed her defenses. Just then, Chigusa exclaimed in disgust, gripping the fish with her bare hands. Misty was surprised by how different the former was. This dark magic user stood out from the rest. Misty has a solid reason for being careful around Chigusa. In their world, the abilities of dark magic users are based on belief. They are firmly rooted in cruel ideas like creating disorder or harming others. Additionally, those who practice dark magic have souls filled with concealed darkness, which has shaped who they are and grants them both power and mental resilience. When she says it that way, Sojiro realizes it's similar to having faith in unseen gods deep inside. To help Chigusa understand, Sojiro told Misty that their new friend believes in something else, like the weekly shonen magazine. This idea might seem strange to Misty because it's a cultural difference, but she didn't ask any more questions. More importantly, he finally welcomed Misty back after being apart for a few days. It felt a bit strange, but They both just laughed it off while Chigusa sat nearby, dozing off with a fish in her hand. Misty completely changed her attitude when she found out that Chigusa was from the same place as Sojiro. Now she's friendlier to Chigusa, while the other two are captivated by Misty's charm. Jiro also took a moment to show Misty the new cabin, and she was even more amazed since it's built much better than their old hut. She praised the wooden walls for improving the cabin's warmth. He also built a bed and table that can be folded away, creating more space in the room. What's even more interesting is that both Chigusa and Sojiro kept removing their shoes when they were in the cabin. Sojiro mentioned that it was just a habit rooted in their Japanese culture. Misty chose to join in, so she slipped off her shoes too because she didn't want to be the odd one out. He's still working on the entrance as there's a 3-part earth to set up in the entryway. They also took a look at the roof, which is quite tall and beautifully constructed. Chigusa mentioned that she assisted in placing the timber using her dark tentacles. Sojiro was surprised to see the two chatting so easily. Even though she had assisted with the building, watching her speak so enthusiastically showed that she had fun creating it too. Later, Misty saw Sojiro doing something interesting. He was holding a bowl filled with a liquid. He told her that Chigusa had given him olive oil, which they could use for cooking. He was thrilled to prepare some traditional meals from his hometown. Is Sojiro saving this special dish just for her? Clearly he was, which made Misty even more thrilled about it. But still, why did Chigusa have so much oil to begin with? She kept it on hand because she had nothing to prepare. If they fried the fish in oil, it would taste even better. Sojiro will create potato starch by crushing the plants and placing them in a cloth. He will then squeeze the cloth in water, causing the water to turn cloudy with the particles. After it settles, he ignores the water and does the same thing again. The leftover powder at the bottom will turn into potato starch. Sojiro has been marinating some special meat and saving it for a treat. He dusts the meat with potato starch before frying it to make Tatsuda age. Misty and Chigusa smiled brightly. It tasted amazing. Chigusa shed happy tears as she enjoyed carriage for the first time in years. The potato starch created a crunchy layer when fried, surrounding tender meat that was full of flavor. In a true Food Wars scene, Jiro suddenly recalled something while he was tinkering with his cooking tools. Moments later, he offered Chigusa some skewers. She gasped, her eyes sparkling at the sight of the fried chicken on a stick. He also shared one with Misty. They both loved eating together, which surprised him but was something he had wished for. The following day, the two women enjoyed a bath together. Sojiro recalled how Chigusa wouldn't put her head underwater, prompting Sojiro to come up with the idea of using a bucket. The two women are now having fun bathing together with Sojiro's latest creation. Sojiro's quiet life is about to become much more exciting with both ladies sharing the same cloth. So, how do you create a bucket? Sojiro took his time to walk Chigusa through the steps of making one. He began by cutting the board into 10 pieces to create side plates, arranging them into a decagon. It's important to position them at the right angle. They can be connected in the center. Then, he shaped a plank into a trapezoid, making the bottom narrower, and continued to smooth it into a curved surface. He gathers everything and ties them together with a string. Then, he trims the top and bottom parts before polishing both the inside and outside. He then carves a channel on the inside and fits in the bottom plate that matches the groove. At last, they have a bucket as the finishing touch. Jure smoothed out the plane and secured it with a bark band. After making sure there were no leaks, Chigusa and Misty used it for their bath. Seeing the two women enjoying a bath with something he made brought Sojiro great joy. For him, there's nothing better than making something helpful for those in need. He made up his mind to create tools that fit their needs. However, his train of thought was interrupted when Chigusa pointed out that the fabric wasn't thick enough. It's almost transparent. In contrast to her, Misty enjoys the feel of the fabric. It's soft and easy on the skin, thanks to Musubi's skill. The way the fabric draped over Misty made even Chigusa stop in awe of the elven woman's figure. Misty pointed out that Chigusa was in the deeper section of the river because she was attempting to catch some fish swimming close by. She might be able to grab a few of these fish using her dark tentacles to sneak up on them. Misty advises her to keep the water calm and not make too much noise, as it could draw in monsters. Chigusa was ready to tell her that everything was okay, even though it clearly wasn't. The girl had fully gone under the water. Misty shouted for Sojiro's assistance. They were able to rescue Chigusa just before it was too late, but she was in rough shape. Misty thinks it might be one of those slime creatures because they are attracted to dark magic. Because of this situation, Jiro's list of concerns keeps getting longer. This means it's important to be careful, even while taking a bath. Misty believes they shouldn't get too worked up because slimes usually don't strike unless they're disturbed. Chigusa woke up just as Sojiro noticed a glimmer nearby. It was a glass bead. Actually, what Sojiro is holding is the cell of a wicked smile. This cell has broken away from the nucleus and comes together to create a round shape. Due to its silky feel, some folks purchase it, making it a simple way for new adventurers to make cash. Misty adds that if the glass beads lacked a core, they would be quite safe. If there are, It could be a problem because slimes tend to cluster. Battling one slime is manageable, but facing a group can be quite challenging. The only way to beat them is to destroy the cores. At that moment, someone breaks the glass beads with a stone, and naturally, it's Chigusa. The distressed girl was in shock, breaking them apart before they could connect. That's when Sojiro saw that they turned into smaller balls when the core was crushed, and he chose to keep them. This world is full of fascinating things and beings. Meanwhile, Misty stops Chigusa from practicing dark magic while they are in the river. Suddenly, Ukatama showed up in front of them, and another Ukatama appeared as well. It was as if the divine creature had transformed into a blob. Misty felt excited when she realized it was Ukatama's baby. Even though they looked the same, Jiro could tell which one was Ukatama and which was Katama. To help everyone tell them apart, Misty chose to tie a ribbon on one of them just before she went hunting with Matsukaze. Chigusa casually mentioned Misty's habit of tying ribbons, which upset her. In an instant, Misty started rambling, sharing her reasons for why using a ribbon is a smart way to tell the two Yukatamas apart. Out of nowhere, the two women started sharing too much with each other. In the end, Misty gave in and confessed her awkward hobby of collecting ribbons. She just wishes Chigusa would keep it quiet from Sojiro, but it's too late. He's already heard everything. He heard it all because he stepped in to prevent a fight between Chigusa and Misty. Plus, Sojiro was already aware of the ribbon from earlier. He thinks it's charming too. Being the nice guy he is, Jiro tells Misty that it's perfectly fine to enjoy what she loves. He believes that Misty really fits the vibe of liking adorable things. When she heard him say that, it motivated her to challenge Red. To hide her embarrassment, she playfully hits Sojiro on the shoulder, just like the shy girls in shoujo manga. She scolds him, pointing out that as a divine being, he shouldn't be flirting with anyone else. Misty dashes away with Matsukaze for their usual hunt, leaving Sojiro puzzled and rubbing his shoulder. But where did Chigusa go? The gloomy girl dashed into the woods, feeling like she had let down Sojiro and Misty. To make things right, she decided to collect some wild herbs as a gesture of apology, wishing it would be enough to keep her from being sent away from the campsite. Chigusa walked in right as Sojiro was discussing his new plans, including an outdoor barbecue space, hoping for concrete to make it sturdier. She interrupted him, offering Sojiro the herbs while looking down, pleading not to be cast out. Naturally, she won't be. Sojiro was thinking about miwatsushi, the traditional flooring found at the entrance of Japanese houses. Chigusa is amazed that he was able to create a building material like that. Jiro mentions that he gathered almost all the supplies, except for slaked lime and eggshells. She proposed they look at bird nests. But what will they do with the eggs inside? Do they eat them? Jiro believes it's better to smash them open because the insides might be a yolk or even a partially developed chick, which really disgusts Chigusa. It took some time to help her relax, and he figured they would deal with that situation when it arises. His main focus at the moment is to keep their outdoor space looking good and ensure it's safe from the weather. Chigusa noticed how carefully he spoke about their campsite and couldn't help but mention how passionate Sojiro is about these matters. Honestly, Sojiro mentioned that how you present yourself and your appearance matter a lot, especially when it comes to dining. If you ignore these aspects, it's almost like eating garbage, which is a bit of an overstatement. Chigusa would feel more content in a nicer environment, wouldn't he? He's correct. Chigusa is more curious about the little house he built nearby. Jiro mentioned that he made the small hut to honor a god. Although he hasn't held a groundbreaking ceremony yet, he aimed to build a small shrine for the deity and worked hard to practice making a roof. The more he considered it, the more the structure began to look like a tiny house. In the end, Sojiro stopped halfway, but he ended up with an adorable birdhouse. It also served as useful practice for him. Misty showed up out of nowhere, intrigued by the conversation between the two as she spotted the little house. Chigusa explained that Sojiro used it to practice for building a real one. Misty became really excited and wanted to know where her room and Chigusa's room were. This made Chigusa a bit flustered since she didn't mind staying in the attic or somewhere similar. Matsukaze showed up out of nowhere and barked at Misty, bringing back her focus. Now that she recalled, Misty had actually caught a big fish and needed help bringing it back. Sojiro recommends that she take Chigusa while he sets up the hall for dissection. With that, the two women headed out as Sojiro began getting dinner ready. Out of nowhere, a friendly voice greeted Sojiro, referring to him as Legaria Master. He swiftly glanced around, wondering who was speaking, and then saw the door of the tiny cabin swing open. Suddenly, a beautiful and delicate being appeared before Sojiro. It was a fairy with shimmering silver hair. She talks about how the fairy world has been feeling dull lately, but here she is, having discovered a little place full of life and excitement. With a serious look, she faces Sojiro and tells him that this house will belong to a skilled fairy. In exchange, a gifted fairy will assist Sojiro, and she even refers to him as her master. Swift wings hush their noise, Mistia simply smiles and tells Soju that this talented fairy could be something special, but Soju can see past her words. That was his answer to Mistia. At least she honestly says she has no clue. It's their first encounter, and the distance between them is already significant. This could mean trouble for Soju. Mistia finds it a hassle to take fairies seriously, so she advises Sojiru to just overlook them. On the bright side, she mentions that fairies aren't bad, and points out that the one nearby offered to help with the chores. Jiro has nothing to say about it, but if fairies aren't bad, then she can definitely use the house. The fairy zooms past him and expresses her gratitude to her master. However, our main character is eager to find out her name. The skilled fairy goes by the name Sanaya. That's what I call myself, she says to him. At that moment, Chigusa strolls over, shouting to Sojiro. She inquires about where to place the meat they had prepared earlier when her gaze unexpectedly lands on a fairy. Without warning, Scenaria delivers a swift kick to Chigusa's face, just as he whispers, "A little gentleman." Chigusa crashes to the ground, but Scenaria feels no guilt. She was surprised to find the dark creature guarding the regalia. Now, it's her job, the skilled fairy, to handle the danger. Jiru steps in front of them, shielding Chigusa as he assures the fairy that the latter isn't harmful. It may be sad, but it's true. He lifts Chigusa into the air like a child, who is sobbing loudly. "I'm sorry, little one," Chigusa starts. "When you mention a small humanoid, doesn't that typically refer to that sort of thing?" Scenaria brushes her off and turns to Sujiro, checking if he's alright instead. "Are you experiencing bad dreams?" Sujiu claims he isn't. Mistia jumps into the chat and backs up Sujiu's point. He doesn't mind Chigusa's gloom if that's what the fairy wants. Really? Even Scenaria agrees that this is something hard to believe, even just once. That being said, she'll raise her opinion of her master. Regardless of her assessment, what Sujiru really wants is for the fairy to say sorry to Chigusa. Just take a look at her. She's scared. Sanaya, the skilled fairy, is ready to follow her master's orders and say sorry to the dark creature. However, seeing Chagus's tearful expression makes her hesitate. What's the matter? She says she's not afraid because a strong fairy has nothing to fear, as if her shaking isn't clear evidence of that. Sojiro asked her to be nice and get along with everyone, and she agreed to give it a shot. However, after some time, Chigusa began to hide behind Sojiro whenever Scenaria was around. Even Mistia had sympathy for Chigusa. Just like that, the Sojiro compound opened its doors to another newcomer. The resident is now resting on the couch. While it serves its purpose, Sanaya thinks the furniture is missing some style. She requested a neoclassical design, which is quite a unique choice, don't you think? That day, Sojiru realized that Scenaria is quite particular. She keeps suggesting that adding soothing designs to the legs and edges would be beneficial, noting that art often reflects this. She also emphasizes that he can't enhance comfort using only animal fur or fabric, which is why she advises making and adding an air mattress. That's great, but Soju doesn't have any material that can stop air. Then Scenaria mentions that in the forest of sacred trees, there are trees that produce rubber sap. Once he gets those, he needs to hand them over to Moss and Musubi. By mixing them with fabric, they can start making things. Wow, Jiro was unaware of that. The fairy goes on to explain that the Shinju's forest was made during the time of the gods. It has a lot of helpful plants. Scenaria believes that using these resources wisely will keep the land in harmony. Jiren listens closely, though he only grasps part of her words. After she finishes explaining, she inquires if he experienced any kind of attraction to her, the remarkable fairy. Absolutely not. Jiro feels a little uneasy about her question, while Scenaria thinks it's strange. Didn't she just flaunt her skills? Plus, she's quite petite. He suggests that she's putting too much emphasis on being small and impressive. In other words, are you being a bit too self-involved? Scenaria let go of his opinion and moved forward without hesitation. Now she intends to gather rubber and asks him for a sharp tool. Jiro makes a tiny dagger for her, and since she's so little, it feels like a dragon slayer in her hands. She twirls it around, impressed by how useful it is. Suddenly, she suggests that he should build a bed for himself. When Soju inquires why, Scenaria simply replies that it will be helpful. With that, she takes off into the sky. What an odd creature with unusual habits she is. Before she goes any further, Soju calls out from behind, asking for help once she's finished gathering the sap. Scenaria turns around and reassures him that it's not necessary to worry about it. Out of nowhere, she rushes over to Chigusa and lifts her up, telling Soju how strong she is. At the same time, Chigusa is surprised to find herself floating. Wow, even though Sanaya is tiny, she's full of surprises, right? Out of nowhere, the fairy lets go of poor Chigusa, but luckily, Sojiro manages to catch her. "Great catch," the fairy exclaims. But Chigusa, feeling overwhelmed by the gremlin clinging to Sojiro, grips him even tighter, nearly curling up around him. "Fairies give me the creeps," she says, shaking. Meanwhile, Scenaria wonders if they should speed up finishing the bed. But no way, not while Sojiro is around. There's no rush. The following day, Sojiro feels cheerful. You see, yesterday the fairy disrupted his tasks, but now he has transformed the home altar into a temple design. It's the neoclassical style she desired. Inside, there's a tiny statue of the mother goddess. As Sojiro admires his creation, Musubi and the fairy swoop down above him. Musubi lands on his head, leading Sojiro to wonder if his moth buddy enjoys it. Saintia suggests adding more color. Being a skilled fairy, she offers to brighten it up with flowers and tells Sojiro to create small flower pots. She emphasizes that he should keep them small. After reviewing his work once more, Sojiro acknowledges her point. Musubi creates a magical circle suddenly, leading Sojiro to wonder if his moth friend wants to join in. Musubi took out a fabric-like piece and spread it across the little temple. Oh, so Musubi is looking for a fancy cloth. Nope. Sojiro understood and said he would add one. As he focused on his task, the fairy couldn't resist asking what he had thanked the goddess for. So far, many of Soji's dreams have come true. Honestly, he just wants to express his gratitude. Ultimately, the desire he quietly expressed during his rebirth has been consistently fulfilled. Additionally, he possesses skilled hands to create even more. But that's not all. He also has surprisingly friendly neighbors who even lend a hand with hunting. In short, he doesn't want anything more for Sojiro than this. This is sufficient. Sonoria annoys him with her inappropriate wishes, and he has to directly ask her to stop making such requests to the goddess. Sonora can only sigh, wondering what he really understands about it. He's all about making wishes come true, isn't he? What? What is she trying to say? Sojiro recalls doing the opposite of that. The power of darkness is clear, Sonora starts. She dreams of tasty meals and a secure home. She reminds him that he has already given her those things. Now that she said it like that, Sojiro sees her point. The fairy shares that Mistia's playful activities, which involve the ear-tipped girl, are a hassle for the humans and their friends. Despite this, Soju is quick to embrace it. Sojiro furrows his brow and asks her what she means by that. Mistia hopes that the creatures of the Shinju forest and its spirit animals will benefit from them. Now that she brings it up, Sojiro recalls Mistia mentioning something similar earlier. Is her wish really a problem? Senya thinks it all comes down to what Mistia hopes to use it for. Based on her understanding, only the creatures with long ears can heal this forest. However, Mistia openly states that she will never use it for fighting and works to protect it, even during the ongoing wars between the nations. Hold on, a war? Does this imply that even during a conflict, Mistia is looking for ways to use resources peacefully? Scenario verifies that it's accurate. This is quite annoying for those in charge. While people are caught up in violence, Mistia is focused on saving endangered animals. As a result, influential figures from various areas have dismissed and turned away her pleas for help. Without anyone to back her up, she knows she can't achieve this dream by herself. There's also a possibility that some might fake their commitments, but then again, she's an elf. Scenaria proposes that he create a binding curse, prompting Sojiro to ponder the idea. What if Mistia agreed not to use it for battle? What if she discovers something even more powerful, but isn't able to use it? That would create a major issue. Jiro understands that charcoal from this forest can melt iron. This makes it a valuable resource, similar to coke coal. He still believes those trees aren't a good enough reason to make a promise. Scenaria chimes in, saying that he, the outsider, is the only one who truly gets Mistia. Now she wants to know what he intends to do with the forest moving forward. Didn't Sadek ask him that as, well, Jiru doesn't have big dreams, and he hasn't thought about how to use Shinju's forest. However, he is clear about what he doesn't want. Jiru is tired of bland food because he's had enough of his old life. I crave extra ingredients to create tasty meals and the chance to enjoy them. He shares with Scenaria that it's a place he wants to hold dear. That's the way I want to live. Creating things with care in my own hands helps me appreciate life more. While he looked at his hands, a thought struck him. He felt a connection to Mistia's mission and wanted to help. Scenaria cocks her head in curiosity. Family ties. Jiru says that for those who don't care, it's just a bunch of pointless stuff, but she believes it could be useful for someone. In short, it's about feeling appreciated. Bringing joy to someone makes them feel that your actions matter and are remembered. Perhaps even more than that. When something you hold dear is valued by someone else, you truly grasp that emotion. He shares with the fairy. Now that I get it, I can help Mistia achieve her dream. As he reflects on it, Mistia finds herself all alone, with no one sharing her vision. How many months has she been lost in this forest? Scenaria tells him he's one of the few who truly cares in this world. But then she shifts the conversation back to the flower pots. Isn't he finished making them yet? She silently tells him to fetch the cloth. This annoyed him slightly since he's only doing it because he enjoys it. She shouldn't act like a former boss. But the next day, the small shrine is adorned with tiny flowers and bursts with vibrant colors. The skilled fairy loves the temple. She shares this with Sojiro, smiling happily. He grins back and appreciates her kind words. The Sojiro community depends on the river for their water to thrive in the outdoors. It's risky to get close when it's raining, as the water remains cloudy for days. They could set up a rainwater tank to collect water, but that would require extra work for upkeep and conservation. Now we find ourselves in this situation. Jiro and Chigusa are spending time together on this lovely day. He tells her that now that they have rubber, collecting water every day will be simpler and won't be affected by rain. So today, they are going to dig a well. To achieve this, he seeks Chigusa's assistance, and she eagerly agrees. But hold on, is it the same well where Setoko appears? Chigusa grins and proposes they set it up a little further from her home. Jiro sees her shaking and understands what's on her mind. This time, they will create a hand pump. All right, let's get started on building a hand pump. Jiro mentions that the one he saw is from way back. He at least recalls how the mechanism operates. A pump works like a syringe. It has two main parts: a piston that pushes, and a cylinder that holds everything together. They start right away. First, they apply the same technique they used for the wooden bucket they created earlier. They form a slim, elongated tube. Next, they secure a base plate with a big hole in the middle to the bottom of the tube, finishing the structure. Next, we focus on the piston. Jiro shapes and carves a piece of wood into a cylinder, and then uses a file to make it smooth. Next, they use flexible leather and fasten it to the side, allowing it to extend a bit at the top, about a third of the way up. Jiro then describes how it works to Chigusa, explaining that as it moves up and down, the leather wraps closely around the cylinder wall and glides smoothly. Sojiru keeps working by boring a hole in the middle of the piston and creating a rubber disc that perfectly fits over it. Then, they take the copper sheet they purchased in town and cut it into a square shape, tilt one end a bit, secure the copper plate onto the rubber disc, making sure it covers the hole completely. The hole should be beneath the copper plate. Next, they secure the section of the rubber disc that doesn't cover the copper. In this setup, when water flows up from below, the rubber expands. However, when water comes down from above, it seals shut like a lid, acting as a valve. The piston is now finished. Next, they connect a rod to link the piston to a handle placed inside the cylinder. The device is nearly complete. Now, it's time to put their new machine to the test. Jiro fills the cylinder with water and looks for any leaks. So far, there are no signs of leaks from the sides or the bottom. He presses the piston, and water begins to flow. Not too shabby. They connect the last pieces required for the pump and securely fasten a base to hold the bottom plate. At last, the hand pump is ready to use. Next up is the valve base. Jiro picks up a board and an eraser, but Chigusa misinterprets him and believes he mentioned a ball base, like a cat's toy. So Jiro steps in to help, clarifying that as they repair the base of the cylinder, they also need to create an extra valve apart from the piston. With two valves, they can pull water up and push it out from the top. Next, they take a sturdy wooden board that fits the pump and drill a circular hole in the middle. Then, they create a sloped edge around the hole and attach rubber to the slope to ensure it's sealed. They build a trapezoidal frame with sticks on the bottom of the board and secure it. Next, they shape a stone into a truncated cone to match the opening. They now connect a straight wooden stick to the middle, slide it through the hole in the board, and glue a big round stone to the other end, finishing the valve base. Sojiru demonstrates how it operates to Chigusa. The stone blocks the opening, while the rod helps it move directly up and down. The lower disc catches on the trapezoid, preventing it from rising too high and escaping the hole. He suddenly falls silent, leading her to wonder if something's bothering him. "Is everything okay?" she asks. "Oh yes," he replies. "I never believed I could pull it off, but I really did." Perhaps the goddess's blessing is at play in his thoughts. They take a moment to enjoy their success. While they relax, Chigusa wonders if they will start digging soon, but he reminds her that first, they need to create the lift pipe and casing pipe. He tells her that he'll need her support moving forward, which makes her nervous. But she vows to give it her all. Once their brief pause is over, they dive back into their tasks. Jiro gives her a piece of wood that's just the right thickness, shaped into a long stick. They wrap a sheet of bark around it, secure the bark, and then remove the stick. The outcome is now a water pipe. Because the bark is set in time, it is sturdy enough to hold weight without breaking and won't decay, even with water running through it. After watching Sojiro's work, Chigusa takes on the task of making the next few items. She gives him one of her earlier creations and asks how many more are required. He informs her that they need around 4 because it's 4 meters deep. Yukama took care of the geological survey earlier and pointed out the spot where they'll find water. Soju thinks that's the deepest a hand pump well can go. So, that's a relief. "What? Are you making holes in the pipe?" Chigusa inquires as she observes Soju's actions. For the lower casing pipe, they make tiny holes along the sides. This happens because groundwater flows in through these openings, fills the inside, and the hand pump pulls that water up. Before long, they complete enough pipes using that method. Jiro announces that it's time to begin digging the well. They start by creating a small hole at the site to simplify the task. They use a shovel to break up the soil and then dig down about a meter. After that, they place the casing pipe into the hole and push it down firmly like a stake. He asks Chigusa to take care of it. She uses her shadow magic, summoning an octopus, with the dark tentacle doing most of the heavy lifting. As that was going on, Sojuru couldn't help but wonder, does that chant really have any effect? She says it makes her feel stronger when she does it. He just smiles and stays quiet, but in his head, he thinks maybe that's true. Okay, I'll keep pushing it, he says. Then he suddenly halts halfway. Wait, he started saying it as well, right? Chigusa smiles. Realizing they share a connection, he feels a twinge of guilt for causing a high school girl to worry about him. When he pictures it clearly and voices it, everything seems to fall into place. It also feels like a higher power is somehow answering him. Perhaps this is what she was getting at, he pondered. Let's get back to the pump. Jiru strikes the pipe, then drives in the casing pipe, and after that they put in the drill and begin to twist it. Usually you would take the drill out to dig up the dirt, then do it over and over. But he's fortunate to have Chigusa, who handles all the tough tasks with her shadow control spell, Whirlpool. As the ground is being turned over, her shadow seems to absorb the dirt, making the process quicker. Jiru can't help but feel amazed when he witnesses it. It's a huge support. He mentions that handling all the dirt and sand is a hassle, even with the right tools. He encourages her to continue. Now they simply stack more pipe extensions and go through the same steps again. When Sojiro took a hit from the pipe, it felt different this time. He swiftly leans his ear against the pipe. Chigusa does the same, as they both listen to the sound of water splashing inside. No, they place the lift pipe inside the casing. The tip has holes and is covered with a cloth filter to stop sand from getting in. They fill it with water to the brim for testing. If water flows into the pipe, it indicates there's a layer of water present. After that, they can finally set up the hand pump. It's time for the big reveal. They start by pouring in priming water to form a vacuum in the pump. Sojiro pushes the lever, and water begins to flow. They succeeded. He shifts aside to give Chigusa a chance. The latter eagerly works the lever, impressed by what they've accomplished. Jiro smiles as he observes her, recalling that Yukatama mentioned she would take care of the drainage. Now, they just need to create a suitable water outlet and integrate it into the surroundings. I'm here again, Mistia says, as Sojiro greets her. I heard you were working on a well, but it looks like it's already finished, she inquires. Sojiro says everything went well because of Chigusa's support, which impresses Mistia. Since she's already present, Mistia thinks about cleaning her feet, and Sojiro quickly runs to grab a towel for her. The elf girl relishes the refreshing water, curious about what Chigusa did as they sit by the basin. Just as she was about to respond, Matsukaze rushed toward her in a flash. When Sojiro comes back with the towel, Matsukaze is busy shaking the water from his fur. Meanwhile, our main character decides to grab more towels after noticing how soaked Chigusa is. Mistia inquired if the girl could get up. Meanwhile, Chigusa was in tears, feeling that all her efforts today had led to this moment. She'll give it a shot to stand up. Remote cabin. So, what exactly is an off-grid cabin? It's a type of building or way of living that functions on its own, without depending on public services. Jiru explains that it's like constructing a cabin in a remote area, deep in the woods. If you love nature, you've probably come across that idea before, right? Jiru got the inspiration while watching a lot of bushcraft videos. So, is that what you're up to now? Chigusa wonders. Isn't a video a bit dull? She mentions. At the same time, Mistia struggles to understand because what exactly is a video? In response to Chigusa's question, Soju highlights that videos featuring girls doing it received a lot of views. Bad decision, because Chigusa catches him in the act. Are you talking about the ones with eye-catching thumbnails featuring women? He could only grin and fidget slightly as he replied. After a moment, he lets out a sigh and says, "You really just said that." In an instant, Mistia gets the hang of their conversation and begins to playfully tease him about staring at breasts. He was simply pointing out that those types of videos get a lot of views. Chigusa catches him once more. He can only squint at her. This girl really knows how to play with the vibe when it works for her. Nope. Anyway, let's get back to discussing the cabin. He explains that A-frame cabins have many different designs, and he's thinking about constructing one as a relaxation spot. Currently, the only structures with roofs in the area are the separate huts, the storage shed, and the dining space. In other words, there isn't a designated spot for taking breaks. He believes it's better to have separate areas for eating and relaxing, as meals will be more enjoyable that way. Misty is okay with that, but does he really need to discuss it with her? He mentions that he intends to create a large one, so it could take a few days to complete. He mentions a bit awkwardly that there are other helpful things he could create, so he's unsure if it's truly fine to spend time on something like this. The two girls look at him quietly, sharing glances before they respond. Mistia grins and says, while she appreciates that he's considering them, she encourages him to focus more on his own desires. She reassures him, I believe it's perfectly okay to create what you're passionate about. Chigusa lifts her hand to speak up. She already has a bed and a bathroom, so she doesn't require anything else. As long as I'm employed, I won't be thrown out, will I? She asks, anxious. Mistia gives Sojiro a friendly pat on the back and reminds him that even though she received her divine powers, it's important to enjoy them and make the best of the situation. That's all Sojiro needs to hear, and he shyly expresses his gratitude to both of them. He moved ahead swiftly with the relaxation space and put together a plan with Chigusa. Just then, a voice chimed in, noting that Sojiru had finally taken steps to make a proper bed for his wonderful fairy. Naturally, it's Scenaria. She examines the plans while Sojiru remarks that in terms of pride, this tiny fairy outshines most humans. Warning, I don't like the word big, she says, glaring at him. She warns him that if he doesn't retract his statement, she'll bombard him with cedar pollen. He almost asks if it's made of glass, but Sora quickly clears that up by saying it isn't. She can create delicate see-through walls using just wood, water, and a smooth moss-dissolving mix. Oh, Masubi. She quickly mentions that she will mostly handle it, even though Masubi's materials are just as important. When she inquires whether she should create it, Jiro simply lowers his head. Moments later, Scenaria shows up, holding a CNF film that she magically shrank with her own fairy powers. Jiro was amazed by what he saw. That was top-notch stuff. Trees consist of compressed cellulose fibers. CNF is a nanofiber form of that cellulose, reduced to 110,000th the width of a human hair. CNF film, a unique paper created from CNF, performs similarly to many polymer materials. Chigusa examines the CNF film brought by Scenaria, while Soju goes on to describe the material's features. It's easy to carry, incredibly tough, and completely sealed. It's tougher than steel and keeps air from getting in. Additionally, its fiber thickness is less than the wavelength of visible light, allowing it to transmit light. Saint explains that they can use this to create windows. Absolutely. Jiro is aware that they can do it, and they do it perfectly. So, this clever fairy can use it as a bedroom without any problems, correct? Saria agrees with him. Sojiro reminds her that it's important to remember that it's still a shared area. With a concerned look, Sojiro asks if she believes that just because she can manage it, the space belongs to her alone. Sanaya took a moment before rejecting the claim. That silence clearly shows you were considering it, he remarked. Rather than refusing, Sina suddenly vanishes into thin air. Come on, Sojiro groans. They have all the supplies ready, so it's time to start building. A-frame cabins are fairly simple in design. You just need to create a wedge-shaped box that someone can fit into. First, they set down a big stone base, then built a square frame and used thin boards for the bottom. Additionally, they used the CNF film to make double-glazed windows, which have a layer of air in between. This air layer provides waterproofing and insulation. After that, they place sturdy wooden boards in line, and just like that, the floor is complete. Then comes the section that acts as both the roof and the walls. With Chigusa's ability to control shadows, they grab two wooden beams that are already connected at an angle and position them on the floor. Just like that, the basic structure starts to come to life. Jiro and Chigusa stand side by side to review their project, and she mentions that it resembles a triangular tent. He agrees, saying that's essentially the main concept. As they prepared to build the walls, Sojiro had Chigusa set up the loft floor. She appeared to be having a great time, especially knowing the space would be small and dim, just right for her. Sojiro then points out that they also need to put in some windows at the top. She eagerly agrees to help with the installation of those fixtures. After the outer walls and windows are set, Sojiro applies the CNF film to the walls to make them waterproof. While he worked, Chigusa questioned why he didn't simply use his magical tool to secure everything. Using craft gear doesn't ensure it will stop both heat and water, so they might still need the CNF film. You're referring to that item that can seal buckets so well that not a single drop escapes, correct? He inquires. When Chigusa agrees that's the one she means, Sojiro explains he's worried it might block the air, and they could all end up suffocating. That made her nervous, but that's why he's addressing each issue one by one. After putting down the film, they place boards on top and then cover them with a black paint. A few days after beginning work on the new cabin, it's finally complete. They now have an A-frame cabin in their yard. Mistia praises him and inquires about his feelings during the process. Jiro admits it was challenging, but seeing the final result made him realize it exceeded his expectations. It's definitely worth a try. She smiles brightly because he speaks just like a true artisan with his words. She has to agree that the design is impressive, as the magical artifact helps harmonize the various types of magical energy and materials from different races. It doesn't seem overpowering, she says to him. She adds that even though it seems simple, it has a great vibe, which is really pleasant. Jiro just looks at her, confused by her reaction. He was surprised to get such a thoughtful perspective on his work. And what does she mean by magical ability? He doesn't quite understand that part. It sounded like something an elf would say. Scenaria pops up unexpectedly to join the conversation. Mistia reminds everyone that she's an elf, just in case it wasn't clear. In response, the fairy retorts that elves pay attention to both appearances and feelings, which is good, but they often overlook how their actions affect others. That's why many think elves are full of themselves, she adds, her words hitting a sensitive spot with Mistia. If Scenaria hesitates to choose her words thoughtfully when she first sees something, it will be too late. You can share your thoughts about it later, but the moment will have passed. Scenaria perches on Soju's shoulder, sharing that teasing is a special right of fairies. Elves, however, tend to do it without meaning to, which makes it even more frustrating. Scenaria reminds them that while magic is nice, the focus should be on the new building. She points out that even though it's not decorated, every board is perfectly polished, and the materials were selected to hide the knots. You can sense the beauty of a culture that appreciates the look of wood. She also mentions that while solid black paint might appear to help a building blend into its surroundings, in a forest, painting a structured shape black actually makes it more noticeable. The enchanting light bounces off the sturdy wooden walls, casting a cozy, soft glow throughout the room. A nice detail, master. She wrapped up her thoughts on the new common space. Jiro's face turns red as he asks if she truly feels that way. He's glad to know things ended up just as he hoped. Mistia is surprised to see him fall for the boastful fair's comments. She decides to go along with it, telling Sojuru that she had the same thought. Scenaria takes the win this time, and as irritating as she can be, she's correct when she points out, good taste isn't everything. Sojiro steps in to calm things down, reminding them that Chigusa put in a lot of effort on this project too. The girl is still shaken by what Scenaria did to her. Please don't send me into the fight. I'm just a little stone on the ground, she says, shrinking back. In the end, Sojiro pulls her inside, proposing they explore their new shared place with Mistia following them. As soon as they enter, Mistia and Saintia discover the freshly made bed. It's exactly what the fairy asked for, a double air mattress. She lies down in the room, commenting that it seems perfect for romance. As the dazzling fairy, she rates it a 70 out of 100. She highlights that Sojuru's eagerness to do it really stands out. Sojuru slams his fist down beside Scenaria, sending her soaring through the air. He's had enough. Are you saying that all that work to understand what the creator meant was just leading up to that joke? Ugh, she's so irritating. With a blank look, he approaches Mistia to reassure her that there's nothing to stress about. He finally realizes that fairies are really wicked. The other person just nods in agreement. The bed frame can be folded up easily. They just have to take it apart and collapse the legs, making it half its original size. It can also serve as a bench. As for the large window on his right, he points out that there's a dark film at the top. If they take it down, it will hide the view from outside, just like Chigusa asked. Mistia nods and smiles in agreement. At times, it's actually nicer to keep the sunlight out. Now, they focus on the main highlight of the window. He gives it a push, and it swings open to reveal the wooden deck. Mistia glances around, astonished by this addition. She stands wide-eyed. And yes, that's it. That's the expression Sojuru was hoping to see. Chigusa wonders if this is a hidden base. Scenaria, looking down on her, replies that comments like that only make her seem worse, especially since Mistia and Soju are the most thrilled. Chigusa felt embarrassed by the remark. Meanwhile, Soju couldn't help but think about how the young people were getting overly excited. Well, with the cabin built, they finally have some space to relax. But what does he mean by that? Now that they have more water and room to rest, they'll be okay, even if they head to the village to shop or happen to catch something really big. Chigusa finally gets the point. Sojiro mentions that town has great shops. He intends to take anything useful he can create there. I'm sure they'll be pleased, he says, creating handmade items and selling them from time to time, then treating himself to a few nice things is the relaxed lifestyle he has always dreamed of. Chigusa volunteers to assist him, and he gladly accepts her help. He's willing to give it a try and will put in his best effort, but for now, he plans to relax. Is that Urify? In the town, Sedek and Darrow are still dealing with an issue. Do you recall the twin venom snakes, Mistia and Soju, that were taken down a few chapters ago? The merchant Darrow and Vic are still searching for someone to buy the antidote, as it cures some of the most lethal poisons. Sadak brought some positive news and might have found a possible buyer. It appears that a prince was injured in a fight, and poison entered the wound. Since that moment, the boy has been struggling to survive. So what? Darrow inquires whether Sadak has been chatting with a royal supplier. Not at all. Even more exciting, he's been chatting with the king directly. Dude, seriously? Darrow instructs Sadak to take charge of the antidote and keep it safe in his area. The older man feels anxious because, if anything goes wrong while he has it, it could lead to a major crisis. Sedk says no because his warehouse is already full of clutter. Darrow insists he should just get rid of the junk. Sedk is upset by that because he can't believe he would call it trash. Also, Darrow's storage area is the tidiest and best arranged. Additionally, it was his son who advised Sedk to simply leave it there. So, what's the fuss about? If they own up to it, then everything should be fine, right? That's how Sedk sees it. And he's got a point. As Darrow mentioned before, if anything goes wrong, they'll be the ones at fault. Joking aside, Sedk asks the older man if he's truly fine with this. Sedk is anxious about what will occur when Soju returns. Daru reassures him that Soju will be okay for more than a year with the supplies he provided. He has also set aside plenty of spices and medicine for Sojuru, so he can come pick them up whenever he wants. If more people show up or if they're attacked by magical creatures, he'll likely return quickly, don't you think? Sedk wonders. What if, instead of gathering items, he comes to offer even more for sale? What is this guy talking about? Daro mentions that given the amount they've lent Soju, he could hibernate for a decade and it wouldn't matter. In response, Sadak offers a more fitting comparison. If my painting sells for a good price, I'll create even more, no matter how many. The older man's face gradually twisted in annoyance because he knows it's true. He hopes Soju stays asleep. Meanwhile, Daro feels frustrated and is seriously thinking about returning to town soon while stroking Matsuka's. Master, I would like a feast, Scenaria says, looking charming as she makes her unexpected request. Jiro pauses his work and echoes her words. A feast? Noticing her seat, he couldn't help but inquire. Is the stuff in that barrel sake? He asks. Scenaria confirms he's right. Honestly, this great fairy has a hidden reason to make peace with Dark JK. You know, Chigusa. Scenaria believes that humans enjoy the company of fairies, so they can't be apart from them for too long. Still, she can't help but feel uneasy about Chigusa's behavior towards her. Soju thinks to himself that this must be Sina's inner tyrant coming through. Still, it's good to see that even this remarkable fairy understands that Sokka helps build connections. That's why she plans to host a banquet to strengthen her ties with the Dark JK. Before she forgets, Scenaria points out the big bag on the table, which Soju has just seen. He approaches it and asks if she brought it. Out of nowhere, she slips on her aviator sunglasses, casually mentioning how amazing it is that fairies are linked to plants. What? Where did she find those glasses? Scenaria unzips the bag and reaches inside. The moment she reveals the white object to Sojiru, he freezes in disbelief. What? The amazing fairy looks over her glasses and asks if he understands its worth, but Sojiru is still in a state of disbelief. Why? Because it's rice. The guy is left stunned as Sinaya swoops down and perches on his shoulder. She tugs at his earlobe and says, "Isn't this worth lifting the lid for? Our only requirement is to have a drink. Is that fine with you?" Jiro finally faces her, his eyes filled with deep admiration. "Thank you. I can't believe it. You can actually get rice?" He smiles brightly. It's a breeze for the Sina area. But first, can she come back to Sojiro now? Should I make a statue? He asks her. Which do you like better, stone or wood? The wonderful fairy is surprised by his response, wondering if he's serious. Sojiro goes on to say that he would choose anything over 1,000 kinds of enjoyment. He also tells her that if she needs anything from him, she should just ask. When she hears this, Scenaria squints her eyes and becomes serious. She only desires one thing from him. The kind fairy asks him to be more careful with his words in the future. What? All right. Jiro is puzzled, waiting for her to elaborate. Scenaria explains that he doesn't understand how valuable beings like her are compared to the effectiveness of divine tools. She tells him that rice and other things are unimportant. In contrast, the forest in front of them can only be used by Sojiru, so he shouldn't be so modest about it. Scenaria even suggests that if he wants, he can escape this forest. In reality, it would be quite simple to conquer and unite the biggest kingdom in the world. They could grab all the riches and comforts of the world for themselves. It's really not a big deal. Scenaria mentioned that a small container doesn't need to be concealed in this type of forest. Then she posed a question to Soju that he had never considered before. How do you control a powerful force that could destroy everything? What about regalia? Will you rule and consume like a god and conqueror? If that happens, Mistia would be both thrilled and amazed with me, he replied, worry evident on his face. From Scenaria's point of view, that would be delightful. However, Sojiru dismisses the thought, feeling it resembles an exaggerated tale. He just rubs his head in confusion and tells the wonderful fairy that instead of receiving rice, he would prefer to share tasty treats with amazing fairies. This time, she is taken aback by his words. Scenaria is pleased with his response and drifts closer to him. If you're going to offer me something, she says, then I need a replacement for an item I borrowed from a friend's storage. She's put on her shady glasses once more, hands out like she's ready to take cash. In an instant, she transforms back into a tough character. Also, she mentioned that to them. This amount is just like a tiny grain of rice. Did she imply there are several people involved? Jiro lets out a sigh and nods in agreement. All right then. He'll create something nice to thank those people. Scenaria says that's just the way it is. Also, since they can turn into dolls too, it should be okay. Although they aren't really what you'd consider humans. That's decided. Now, so Jiro has to tell the other two about the banquet. Hooray! Sake! Hooray! Rice! Mistia and Chigusa twirl together, enjoying the two new gifts Sojiro has given them, as Makaz dashes around. At the same time, Sojiro and Scenaria observe them from the sidelines. She isn't saying a word, but he can sense that the kind fairy isn't happy about what's happening. To justify himself, he brought both the sake and rice because he wanted to join in the celebration and connect with everyone. Enough, the great fairy is not happy at all. She's deep in thought and staring at him. I won't give in. I never asked for that, she says, shooting him a sharp look. It's unfortunate for her. Mistia isn't bothered by how she feels. She finds it adorable that Sanaya behaves like that. Also, she really enjoys this sort of thing. Who would have thought the elf girl loved steak? She's also really excited about the idea of eating rice. Jiru can't really scold her at the moment because he loves all the compliments she's giving him. Then, he looks over at Chigusa. Check it out, our local goth girl is breathing heavily. It's just rice. Rice, 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 she whispers over and over, almost like a chant. Watching her in such a dazed state, he can only wish that Chigusa took a moment to recognize the wonderful fairy for her actions. That's when he heard Chigusa utter 4 of the saddest words he had ever encountered. It's been 4 years. Sojiro can only hide his face because Chigusa, poor thing, hasn't eaten rice for 4 years. It's no surprise she's so thin. When Sojiro heard that, he couldn't let her meet Sanaya. Just like that, everyone decided to pitch in and get ready for tonight's feast. Chigusa has the job of gathering mushrooms and wild plants with Yukitama by her side. The beast spirit makes sure she chooses the correct ones, and Chigusa feels pleased to see so much grass and mushrooms flourishing around them. Scenaria happily gathers mushrooms on her own, boasting about her talent for finding the best ones. However, instead of being put off by her snobby attitude, Chigusa looks up to her. Meanwhile, Mistia, who is the only member of the river shrimp hunting team, managed to catch a rather large shrimp. Jiro can't help but be amazed at the size of her catch. As he examines the crustacean more closely, he realizes it's losing its flavor quickly. He mentions to her that he wants to catch more to taste, which leads Mistia to question whether it's truly needed or if Sojiro has a specific liking. He mentions that Japanese people really enjoy eating seafood. When Mistia hears him say this, she thinks he resembles a mermaid. You wouldn't want to eat a mer person, would you? What does she mean by that? There aren't any mer people in Japan, he says. What? Hold on a second. He pauses and wonders if mermaids count as merry people. Mistia glances at him, about to chuckle, but the serious expression on his face makes her go pale. Just joking, he says. Just joking. Jiro says that to save his pride. That's a relief to hear. No joke. That really frightened her. She splashes water according to his instructions, but Sojiro decides to keep the story of the 8 white giant dragons a secret from her. After everyone collects the ingredients, they head off to their next jobs. Misty handles the nut flour, while Chigusa focuses on grinding the dried seeds into flour using the stone mill. Sojiro takes care of the knives. He cuts up the vegetables and takes a small bite to feel their crunch. So far, they taste fine, even though they're just boiled with a bit of salt. Mistia was surprised to find that the river shrimp she caught had a bold taste. It turned out to be quite delicious. A few steps away, Mekas dashes over and settles down beside him, eagerly waiting for his owner to give him food. Sojiro inquires before tossing a chunk of meat to the furry spirit. Mekas swiftly grabs the package with his mouth and joyfully runs in circles. Watching him brings a smile to Sojiro's face, and he asks his furry buddy if it was delicious. Mekas approaches Sojiro once more, hoping for another treat, but Sojiro gently reminds him that he's already had one. Disappointed, Mekas walks away, his ears and tail drooping. Sojiro was getting ready to get back to his tasks when he caught some mumbling nearby. He was just about to scold Makis again, but what he saw next nearly stopped him in his tracks. Mistia knelt on the ground, pleading for just one bite. With her eyes shut and mouth wide open, Sojiro stared in disbelief at what he was seeing. What kind of lure is this? Luckily, our guy is a good soul and gives her a piece of meat, just as he did for Makis a little while ago. In an instant, another slice of meat disappeared. But hold on. The playful elf girl summoned a friend. Chigusa kneels down, wondering if it's all right to be like Makis. Sojiro has no option but to share a bit with her too. Before long, they wrapped up the preparations. With that, the celebration kicked off with a toast. They toast with their beer-filled glasses to start the celebration. The beer has a fruity scent and a crisp, refreshing flavor. A hint of tanginess enhances the flavor of the meat, and surprisingly, the foam adds to the taste too. The meals feature plain meat steak presented on a wooden platter. The steak is grilled on a wooden board, giving it a smoky flavor. Mistia takes a mouthful of the meal and thinks it tastes amazing. She's surprised because, although she usually cooks meat, this one has a unique, earthy scent. Next up, they serve fried fish. It's coated with a blend of potato starch and wheat flour, then fried until golden and crispy. Even though it's a tad salty for Sojiro's taste, he thinks Mistia's dish pairs nicely with the beer. He also makes sure to ask Scenaria if she's enjoying the food. Since she's feeling quite worn out today, he figures the food should be really enjoyable for her. However, the stuck-up fairy stays true to her nature, telling him not to ruin the vibe. Scenaria is currently enjoying a plate of tempura. It's a tasty mix of wild greens, mushrooms, and river fish, all dipped in a light white batter and fried until crispy. Sojiro also made a river shrimp paella. It's seasoned with herbs and oil, making the shrimp taste absolutely delicious. Chigusa is crying hard as she enjoys her tempura rice bowl. She exclaims, for the first time in years, as happy tears stream down her face. As Mistia watches her, she can't help but question why she's in tears. Sojiro steps in to clarify that Mistia had often complained about how unappealing the food was in the other world. Great job to her for getting through it, right? Mistia mentions that if that were true, Chigusa could have just cooked her meals like Sojiro does. Scenaria jumps into their chat, claiming that while a great fairy like her can't cook, she can definitely lift the spirits. However, she realizes that in another world, 99% of her kind can't cook either. Jiro is eager to connect with that rare 1%, but Scenaria mentions that they lead a peaceful life. As they chatted, the feasting continued late into the night. Eventually, they finished their meals and were left with just the campfire and each other's presence. Mistia speaks up, revealing that those who practice dark magic often consume humans. Chigusa chimes in, mentioning that they also create illusions, which leads Scenaria to wonder why that happens. Additionally, she wonders how Chigusa can wield dark magic without belief. Perhaps the way the court has dealt with her was quite discreet. No, Chigusa claims this is just an easy win for her. She has faith in Shonen Jump. This thought made Sojiro feel a pang of sadness. His biggest regret is that he passed away before finishing the manga he loved. Chigusa feels the same way. Mistia inquires about the type of manga they were discussing, and Chigusa grins. You've heard about it, right? Mistia, not really in the loop, admits she doesn't understand manga discussions, but she's curious if it's a sensitive subject. He points out that Chagus's whispers are copying that, which makes the other person feel awkward. This is why the story is seen as forbidden in the first place. Since they arrived, Chigusa thinks they might as well go for it. Let's discuss Chigusa's journey of being reborn in another world. A high school girl with the ability to cheat sets out to create delicious treats. She talks to the audience as she goes along. At last, we get to learn about Chigusa. One Monday morning, she remembers heading to school when she tumbled down the stairs at the station. She sensed a warmth and then shut her eyes. In the deep darkness, she discovered a gate. When Chigusa opened her eyes, she realized she was in a shadowy forest, quickly understanding that she had entered a different world. This marked the start of her new life as Iono Chigusa in this strange realm. Chigusa initially forgot many of her memories. She paused for a bit, trying to remember where her school was and who her friends were. She never truly had a way up from the beginning. While she was lost in her memories, feeling emotional in an unfamiliar place, goblins suddenly appeared and attacked her. In a rush, Chigusa scrambles up the closest tree. In the chaos, she accidentally speaks a spell she never learned. That's when she found out she had dark magic, and it went Flumpstone and rescued her. What does Flumpstone even mean? Chigusa left the woods and unexpectedly found herself in a town. At the entrance, the guard first stopped her from coming in since she had no cash, just yen from her old world. He thought her coin was strange, but he accepted it and allowed her to go through. Chigusa spent her entire 290 yen on tolls and found herself broke. While wandering, she met a traveling mage who recommended that she visit the Adventurers Guild. So, what else could the girl do but join up and become an adventurer? There, she learned that to show you defeated a goblin, you need to bring back its right ear to the guild. That's quite harsh, so she's definitely not on board with that. Plus, the concierge mentioned that hunting and logging are banned in the forest near the town, but she encourages Chigusa to go ahead and deal with the monsters without hesitation. Chigusa understands that adventurers can meet a grim fate. It's a frightening and brutal reality, which is why she came up with a plan to leave that life behind. Save your coins, get some sugar, and whip up some treats. Right now, Chigusa has just taken out a few goblins while staying hidden in the trees. She shares that the only isekai tale she knows is about someone who took over the world with desserts. The catch is that in this realm, sugar costs a fortune. Chigusa climbs down from the tree, dreaming that if her treats become a hit, she could open a shop and enjoy a life of comfort. She waves farewell to her wild existence. She was lost in her thoughts and didn't notice that someone else was nearby. Hey, you, a swordsman shouts. You're the mage who arrived not long ago. He wonders aloud if the magic she just performed was dark magic, saying that if it was, that's a really unique skill. Beside the guy stands a girl who seems more cautious about Chigusa. She mentions that it's her first time witnessing magic like that. Is that an issue? Did our girl really say that with a straight face? The man hurriedly steps back, clarifying that's not what he intended to convey. His friend shoots a glare at Chigusa. Seriously?